Welcome to Cosmic Wand. Today's adventure, Harry was betrayed at Hogwarts, but Nevermore's most dangerous student claimed him as hers. If you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Now let's begin. Chapter 1, The Betrayal. They had turned the Great Hall into a courtroom, and Harry Potter understood, the moment he walked in, that the verdict had been written before he ever crossed the threshold. The house tables were gone. In their place stood a single chair on the flagstones where the Sorting Hat usually waited, and around it, rising in a horseshoe of benches that had not been there yesterday, sat the people who would decide what was left of his life. The enchanted ceiling showed a low gray sky with no stars in it. Someone had wanted the room dark, he counted as he walked. It was an old habit and a useful one, and he did it now the way another boy might have prayed. 23 adults on the benches. 9 in ministry robes, plum and deep blue, 6 from the Board of Governors. The rest were faces he half knew, a Wisengamot quorum assembled in a school instead of in London, which told him something all on its own. They had not wanted this heard in the proper chamber, under the proper eyes. They had wanted it done here fast, where the only witnesses would be teenagers and portraits. That was a mistake, not theirs, his, for not seeing sooner that it could come to this. He kept his face still and his pace even. The trick was not to look at the empty middle distance and not to look at his own hands. The trick was to look at the people who would not look back, because the ones who would not meet his eyes were the ones who already knew how this ended. Ron would not meet his eyes. Harry registered it without breaking stride. Ron sat at the far end of the witnesses' bench, hands knotted between his knees, ears red, staring at a particular flagstone as though it had insulted his mother. Beside him, Hermione's face was wet and white and turned toward Harry with an expression he could not afford to read, because reading it would cost him something he needed right now. He let his gaze slide past her, past Ginny, who looked sick, past Neville, whose jaw was set in a way that might have meant loyalty and might have meant nothing. He took the chair in the center of the floor. He did not sit until they told him to, and when the under-functionary and Plum gestured impatiently, he sat the way you sit when you have decided that the chair is a place you are choosing to be and not a place where you have been put. "State your name for the record," said the man at the head of the horseshoe. Harry already knew him, though they had never been introduced. He had made it his business in the last 3 days to learn every name attached to this proceeding, and the one attached to the chairman's seat was Corvin Ashbury, Under-Secretary to the Wisengamot. A spare, elegant man in his 50s with silver at the temples and a voice like a well-oiled hinge. He did not preside from the dais in person, he presided by proxy, his face and shoulders rendered in the green shimmer of a long-range flue projection that hung above the central seat like a saint in a window. The real Ashbury was in London. He had not even bothered to attend the execution of a 16-year-old in the flesh. That, Harry thought, was the second mistake. A man certain of his ground attends. A man who absents himself is a man building an alibi. "Harry James Potter," he said, "you are aware of the charges. I've been told what I'm accused of." He let the distinction sit in the air. Charges implied a process. What I'm accused of implied an accusation. He watched 2 of the governors register the correction and dislike it. Ashbury's projected face did not change. "Then we proceed." What followed, Harry would later reconstruct in full, in order, with the cold clarity that came to him in the worst moments and never when he wanted it. At the time he experienced it as a series of blows, but even under the blows some part of him was taking the room apart and laying its pieces in a row. The facts, as the prosecution arranged them, were these. 6 nights ago, in the small hours, a 5th-year named Quentin Ashbury had been found in the 3rd-floor corridor outside the Charms classroom, curled on the stone, his skin gone the gray of old tallow, black fluid leaking from his nose and the corners of his eyes. The school healer had named the cause within the hour, a bile curse of the old kind, the sort that turns the body's own humors to poison. Quentin had survived. He had survived because someone found him in time, and the someone who found him had run for help, and in the running had passed Harry Potter coming the other way down the same corridor at the same dead hour. That someone was Ron Weasley. The prosecution did not say it crudely. They built it. A prefect on patrol, Ron had taken an extra circuit that week, everyone agreed. A detail Harry would return to discovers a boy dying on the stones. He raises the alarm. On his way to the hospital wing, he encounters Harry Potter, out of bounds, alone, agitated. When questioned later, this prefect, this friend of the accused, reluctantly, the word was used 3 times, confirms that he had heard Harry threaten Quentin Ashbury not 2 days before. A threat made in the entrance hall in front of witnesses over an insult Harry would not specify. He said, Ron Reed, when they put the parchment in his hands and made him say it aloud, he said, "Potter said, say that again and I'll make sure you choke on it." The hall was very quiet. Harry looked at his friend of 6 years and felt the floor of the world tilt a degree, and he held on to the tilt because the alternative was to fall through it. He had said those words. He remembered saying them. Quentin Ashbury, who had spent the autumn term repeating a particular thing about Harry's dead mother in a particular sneering register, had said it one time too many on a bad morning, and Harry had told him to choke on it. It had been an idiot thing to say. It had been the kind of thing that everyone says and no one means, and a week ago it had meant nothing. A week ago, no one had been building a machine to hang him with. And the night in question, the prosecutor went on, gentle as a man laying out cutlery. You encountered Mr. Potter in the corridor. Describe his condition. Ron's throat worked. He still would not look up. He was out of breath, like he'd been running. Running from what? I don't. From the third-floor corridor, perhaps, in the direction of which you had just discovered Mr. Ashbury. Objection isn't a thing they'll let me make, Harry said conversationally to no one, so I'll just note that the witness was also out of breath, having just run the length of the same corridor, and that the prosecutor has put the answer in his mouth twice now. A ripple, Ashbury's projection lifted one silver eyebrow. The accused will not interrupt. The accused will point out manufacturing when he sees it, Harry said, and kept his voice level, because a level voice in a room full of plum robes is worth more than any shout. I was out of bounds, I'll grant that freely. I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchens. The house elves will tell you I was there an hour, and the portrait of the fruit bowl will tell you when I left, because portraits keep better time than prefects. It was true, and it was useless, and he knew both as he said it. He watched the knowledge land on the governors and slide off. House elves did not testify. Portraits could be made to misremember by anyone with a weak and the right charm. They had thought of this. Of course they had thought of this. The whole architecture of the thing was that every alibi he had was made of witnesses no court would weigh, so he stopped spending his alibis. He started watching the prosecution spend its evidence, because evidence, unlike alibis, could be examined for fingerprints. They brought out his trunk. They had searched it without him 3 days ago, the morning after Quentin was found, on a warrant Ashbury's office had signed before the healer had finished her diagnosis, a detail Harry noted and set aside like a stone he would need later. From the trunk they produced 3 things and laid them on a black cloth on a table where the whole hall could see. A vial of something dark and slow that the prosecution named as distilled biolescence, the raw material of the curse that had nearly killed Quentin Ashbury. A length of knotted cord, gray and greasy, that they named a binding cord of the sort used to fix a curse to a victim's name. And a book, small, black, water-stained, its spine cracked, that they named by a title Harry had never read and held up so the cover faced him, watching his face for the flinch that would have damned him. He did not flinch. He looked at the 3 objects the way you look at a chessboard your opponent has set up while you were out of the room, and he understood 2 things at once. The first was that he was going to lose this. The pieces were placed. The clock was running. There was no move on the board that won. The second was that whoever had placed the pieces had done it too well. That book, Harry said, has a flourish and blots inventory charm on the inside cover. They all do. It's how they track theft. The charm logs the last hand that bought it. Read the log. For the first time, the prosecutor hesitated. It was the smallest thing. A half-second pause, a glance toward the greenlit projection of Corvin Ashbury, a flick of the eyes that asked a question and received, in the minute stillness of the answer, a no. The prosecutor set the book down. The provenance of the materials is not at issue. Their presence in the accused's possession is. Their presence in a trunk that your office opened without me present, on a warrant signed before anyone knew a crime had been committed, Harry said. Read the log, that is enough. Ashbury's voice hinged smooth from the green window in the air. Mr. Potter, this is not a debate. You will have your opportunity to make a statement. You will not conduct the proceeding. And there it was. The provenance of the materials is not at issue. In a fair court, the provenance of the materials would be the only thing at issue, because a planted object proves nothing but the planter. They were not going to read the log. They could not afford to read the log. Somewhere in the chain that had carried that book from a shop shelf into his trunk was a hand that the log would name, and the hand belonged to one of the people in this room. Harry drove that into himself like a nail. Somewhere he would find it again in the dark. Then they brought out the wand. A man Harry did not know rose from the benches and came forward, and Harry catalogued him the way he had catalogued everyone. Tall, narrow, dressed in robes a shade too fine for a schoolmaster, with a long, clever face and pale eyes that moved over the room, and counted it exactly as Harry had counted it. This, the chairman said, was Professor Selwyn Vane, newly appointed to the post of Defense Against the Dark Arts, a specialist in curse tracing seconded from the Department of Mysteries for the purpose of this inquiry. Seconded for the purpose of this inquiry. A specialist installed in the school 3 weeks before the crime, he was now the only man qualified to investigate. Harry looked at Selwyn Vane, and Selwyn Vane looked back at him with an expression of perfect, courteous attention, and Harry knew, with the certainty he trusted more than any other faculty he had, that he was looking at the man who had done this. Not Ron. Ron was a tool. Ron's jealousy and Ron's wounded pride and Ron's stupid, sincere belief that Harry had pulled away from him this year, all of that was real, and all of it had been used, the way you use a key that doesn't know it's opening a door. Not even Ashbury in the end, though Ashbury had paid for it. Ashbury was the man who wanted the house, but the man who built the trap with his hands was standing 4 feet away holding Harry's own wand in a velvet cloth like a relic. Priori incantatem, Vane said to the room, and his voice was a teacher's voice, warm and clear, made to carry to the back of a classroom. The reverse spell effect. A wand remembers what it has cast. We compel it to disgorge its most recent workings, and it shows us in light, in echo, the spells last performed. The procedure is old, and it is not subtle, and it does not lie. He turned the wand in his fingers. This is the wand taken from Mr. Potter's person on the morning Quentin Ashbury was found. I will now ask it what it last did. He laid Harry's wand on the black cloth beside the bile vial and the cord in the book. He drew his own, a pale length of something that was not holly, and touched its tip to Harry S., and spoke a word Harry didn't catch over the sudden ringing in his own ears. The hall held its breath. Harry's wand shivered on the cloth, and then it spoke in the way wands speak, which is to say it bled light. A thread of sick gray-green rose off the holly like smoke off a snuffed candle, and the thread thickened and curdled and took, for a moment, the suggestion of a shape, a knotting, a binding, a thing reaching, and a smell came off it that Harry knew, that everyone who had been near the hospital wing that week knew, the smell of the curse that had eaten Quentin Ashbury from the inside. The gray-green echo writhed above the table, and the binding cord on the cloth twitched in sympathy, and a woman among the governors made a small sound and pressed her sleeve to her mouth. There it was, his wand, casting the curse, in front of 23 witnesses, in light that did not lie, except that it did. Because Harry was watching not the echo but the wand, and his wand was 11 inches of holly with a phoenix feather at its core, and he had carried it in the right inner pocket of his robes from the moment he woke that morning to the moment they took it from him on the 3rd floor, and it had not left his hand the night Quentin was cursed, and it had not cast that curse, and Harry knew, not believed, knew, with the part of him that did not bend, that he was watching a lie wearing the shape of proof. He made himself slow down. Panic was a luxury. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the room's horror hardened into the verdict, and he intended to spend those seconds learning everything the lie could teach him. A priori echo was not subtle. Vane was right about that. A wand showed its last spells in reverse order, most recent first, and the most recent spell a wand had cast was the easiest thing in the world to check, because you simply ask the wand to show you more. The echo did not stop at one spell. It rolled back through them, the second to last, the third deeper, until the spellcaster ended it. A genuine reading of Harry's wand would have shown, before the curse, a stack of ordinary things, the lumos he'd cast in the kitchen corridor, a warming charm, the tempest he'd used to check the hour, the small, dull magics of an ordinary night. The echo above the table showed the curse, and then it showed nothing. It thinned and curled and died, and Vane lowered his wand with the grave economy of a man closing a coffin, and the room exhaled, and no one but Harry, had noticed that a wand which had supposedly cast a complex spell curse 3 hours before midnight had apparently cast not one other spell in the entire day. A wand that had cast a single spell and nothing else, as though it had been emptied first, primed, and given exactly one thing to remember. "You stopped it," Harry said. Vane turned his clever face toward him, courteous, attentive. "I beg your pardon. You ended the reading after one echo. A priori rolls back. You stopped it after the first spell." Harry stood. The functionary and Plum flinched toward him, and Harry ignored him and kept his eyes on Vane, because Vane was the only person in the room worth speaking to. "Show the hall the second spell my wand cast, and the third. Show them my whole day. Or tell them why a curse-tracing specialist seconded from the Department of Mysteries forgot the second half of the simplest procedure he knows." It was the best move on a losing board, and he watched it work exactly as far as it could. Vane's expression did not flicker. He was good, better than good. He was an artist, and Harry would remember the quality of his composure for a long time. But the pale eyes moved once to the green window where Corvin Ashbury hung in the air, and again the minute question went up and the minute answer came down, and this time the answer was visible to anyone watching the right faces. 2 of the governors had begun, almost against their will, to lean forward. "The reverse spell procedure," Vane said smoothly, "is delicate. Prolonging it past the relevant casting risks degrading the evidence. I extracted what the inquiry required and no more. To continue would have been irresponsible. To stop," Harry said, "was the entire point." "Enough," Ashbury's voice, and this time the smoothness had thinned just slightly at the edges. "Mr. Potter, you have made your insinuations. The procedure was conducted by a ministry specialist under oath. The Wisengamot does not retry the laws of magic at the demand of a defendant. Sit down." Harry did not sit down. He looked instead at the one chair on the dais that mattered more than the green window, the high seat at the center of the horseshoe where the school's own authority sat, and he spoke to the man in it for the first time. "Headmaster," Harry said, "you've watched a man stop a priori reading after one spell and call it irresponsible to finish. You know what that means as well as I do. Say so." Albus Dumbledore had not spoken once. He sat in the high seat with his hands folded over the head of his cane, and the long beard was white as it had ever been, and the blue eyes behind the half-moons were turned on Harry with an expression of such depthless, weary sorrow that for a terrible half-second Harry mistook it for love. He had spent 5 years learning to read that face. He read it now, and he understood in the silence that stretched and stretched while the whole hall waited for the great man to lift one finger in defense of the boy he had raised to be a weapon, that the sorrow was real and the rescue was not coming. Harry, Dumbledore said at last, and his voice was very gentle and very tired, and it broke something in Harry's chest that he had thought already broken past breaking. There are forces at work here larger than this room. Larger than you, larger than I. The school cannot become a battlefield. Too much depends on the peace we hold here, too many lives, too much that you do not see and that I am not free to show you. The blue eyes held his. I cannot spend Hogwarts to save one boy, not even you. I am more sorry than I can say. And that was the betrayal, not Ron's perjury, which was small and human and bought, not Vane's artistry or Ashbury's greed. Those were enemies, and enemies do what enemies do, and a man could arm himself against them. The betrayal was the old, gentle, sorrowful voice telling him, in front of the people who had built the trap, that the man who had stood between Harry and the dark since he was 11 had run the numbers, and Harry had come out on the wrong side of the sum. I cannot spend Hogwarts to save one boy. Something in Harry went very quiet and very cold, and in the cold it was suddenly, perfectly easy to stop being afraid. He looked away from Dumbledore. He would not give the old man his face. Looked instead at Ron, who had finally raised his eyes, and whose expression, Harry made himself see it whole, was not triumph and not even guilt, but a kind of frightened, dawning sickness, the look of a boy who has pulled a lever because someone told him it rang a bell and has just heard the trapdoor open under his best friend. You believed them, Harry said to him, quietly. It was not a question. Ron's mouth opened. Nothing came out. That's the part you'll have to live with, Harry said. Not that you lied. You didn't lie. You said something true and let them hang the rest on it. The part you'll have to live with is that when it mattered, you found it easier to believe I'd curse a boy to death in a corridor than to believe I wouldn't. He let that sit 1 second. I hope it was worth whatever they told you it would buy. Hermione was crying without sound, her whole face a wreck, and her lips formed his name, and Harry found that he could not look at her at all, because she had not lied and she had not perjured and she had simply fatally not been enough, one girl with a true account of a fruit bowl portrait against a machine built in the Department of Mysteries, and there was nothing to forgive her for and no way to look at her without drowning. So he didn't. Ashbury's projections straightened. The Wisengamot will retire to consider. You won't need long, Harry said. They needed 11 minutes. Harry counted those two. The verdict, when it came, contained a surprise, and the surprise was the most informative thing that had happened all day. He had expected expulsion. He had expected his wand snapped. That was the standard sentence for a minor convicted of casting a near-lethal dark curse. The wand broken across the knee of a ministry official, and the pieces burned. The boy turned out into the Muggle world with the memory of magic left intact precisely so that he would spend the rest of his life knowing what had been taken. He had braced for the snap the way you brace for an amputation. He had already started in the cold, quiet place to plan a life without a wand. They did not snap his wand. Harry James Potter, Ashbury read from London through the green window, is found to have performed a dark curse upon the person of a fellow student in violation of the statutes of this school and the laws of magical Britain. He is hereby expelled from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, effective immediately, and his name struck from its rolls. A pause. In recognition of his minority, and pursuant to the International Confederation of Wizards, Convention on the Continuing Education of Underage Practitioners, the sentence of wand forfeiture is suspended on condition that the subject remove himself from the jurisdiction of magical Britain and complete his education at a foreign institution willing to accept him under supervision. One such institution has been identified. The subject will be transferred within 7 days to Nevermore Academy in the state of Vermont in the United States of America. Should he return to British soil before his majority without the leave of this body, the suspension is void and the forfeiture immediate. The hammer fell. The benches stirred. It was over. And Harry sat in the single chair in the center of the floor and understood, with the cold clarity that had not left him since Dumbledore spoke, that he had just been handed the one thread that would unravel all of it. They had not snapped his wand. The whole apparatus, the warrant signed before the crime, the planted trunk, the seconded specialist, the truncated priori, the bought witness, the school converted to a courtroom so the trial would happen out of London's sight, every part of that machine had been built to destroy him. And at the final stroke, with the boy convicted and helpless and entirely at their mercy, they had declined to take his magic. They had spent enormous effort to convict a 16-year-old of attempted murder, and then, having won, they had let him walk away armed. You did not do that to an enemy. You did that to an asset you intended to use later, or a liability you could not afford to make a martyr. A snapped wand and a ruined boy turned loose in Britain was a grievance with a face, a story the prophet would worry at for a year, a wound the public could see. A boy quietly shipped 3,000 miles to a school no one in Britain had heard of, his wand intact, his conviction filed, his name struck from the rolls and from the conversation. That was not a punishment. That was disappearance. They did not want him broken. They wanted him gone, and gone in a way that left them holding everything he could no longer hold. Everything he could no longer hold. Harry turned the thought over and found, underneath it, the motive he had been missing all afternoon, the why that no amount of jealousy or pedagogy explained. Ron wanted to hurt him. Vane wanted to be paid, but somebody had wanted something specific enough to build a machine this expensive, and the something was not Harry's suffering. It was Harry's place, his name on the rolls of magical Britain. His seat, the Potter seat, and the older seat behind it that the goblins' ledgers knew by another name, the one his parents had never lived to claim, and that would have fallen to him at 17. His vaults, his proxy, the whole inheritance of a house that had been, until this morning, the property of a boy with no living family to defend it, and a long public record of making powerful people nervous. Strike his name from the rolls. Convict him of a dark crime so the conviction follows him forever. Ship him out of the jurisdiction so he cannot contest anything in person before his majority. And in the 7 days while he's crossing the Atlantic, a certain undersecretary moves in the Wisengamot to administer the vacant interests of a convicted absentee minor, for safekeeping, of course, in the public interest, until the boy comes of age, by which time the administration will be a fact and the facts will be a wall. Corvin Ashbury had not framed Harry to ruin him, he had framed Harry to inherit him. Harry stood in the center of the converted hall with the verdict still hanging in the air, and he did the one thing none of them had prepared for. He smiled. It was not a large smile, and there was nothing of warmth in it, and it was directed at the green window where Corvin Ashbury's projected face hung above the dais, watching London distant to see how the boy took the blow. "Thank you," Harry said clearly to the window. "You've been very generous." He watched the smile reach the projection. He watched Ashbury's composed face hold its composure, and he watched, underneath the composure, the first flicker of a man who has just realized that the piece he removed from the board did not understand it was supposed to leave the board, and that he has, perhaps, made a small error in the disposal of it. "You'll want to remember this hour," Harry told him. "I'm going to." The green window cut to black. They marched him out. They gave him an hour to pack and 2 Aurors to watch him do it, which told him they were still afraid of him even now, and he found that mildly cheering. His trunk had been emptied of evidence and of half his clothes besides, the search conducted without inventory, and he packed what was left without hurry while the Aurors stood in the dormitory door and did not speak. Seamus's bed was stripped, Dean's curtains were drawn, the room had the wrong silence of a place its occupants had been told to be elsewhere. No one wanted to be seen in the room of the boy who cursed a child. He understood. He was almost grateful. It saved him the work of goodbyes he had no intention of making. He took his cloak. They had missed it or been told to miss it, and he did not stop to wonder which. He wrapped his father's cloak inside a school jumper and packed it deep, because an invisibility cloak was a tool, and he was going to need tools. He took the photograph album Hagrid had given him, his parents' faces moving and laughing in their frames, and looked at it for exactly as long as he could afford and no longer. He took his wand from the table where they had returned it to him, snapped a vague tracking charm leash to it, and slid it into the right inner pocket of his robes, where it had been the whole of the night Quentin Ashbury was cursed, and he let the feel of it settle the cold thing in his chest into something with edges. The Aurors stepped aside without being asked, which was how Harry knew, before he turned, that someone with rank had come to the door. Minerva McGonagall stood in the dormitory entrance in her traveling tartan, her mouth a thin line, her eyes red-rimmed behind her square spectacles. She had not been on the benches. He had noticed that during the hearing and not understood it until now. She had refused to sit, and refusing to sit had cost her the chance to speak, and she had chosen the gesture that satisfied her conscience over the one that might have helped him. He catalogued the choice without anger. Anger was a luxury, and besides, she had come, which was more than most. "They would not let me testify to your character," she said. Her voice was steady, and it cost her to keep it so. "I tried. The chairman ruled it irrelevant to a question of fact. I have taught in this school for 39 years, Potter, and I have never in my life seen a proceeding run with such efficiency." She made the word an obscenity. "It was decided elsewhere. I want you to know that I know that." "You knew it during the hearing," Harry said, "not cruel, only true, and you sat in the second row and watched." The line of her mouth trembled and held. Yes, he gave her that because she had not lied about it, and because a person who tells you the exact size of their failure is worth more than a person who explains it away. "Then we understand each other, Professor." She crossed the room, the Aurors tensed, and she withered them with a look, and pressed something into his hand. A small brass object warmed from her pocket, a two-way mirror, its surface clouded with age. "It is paired," she said quietly. "The mate is in my desk, and it answers to no ministry charm I am aware of. If you find proof, Potter, the kind that stands in a chamber and not the kind that stands in your own certainty, you send it to me, and I will carry it to people in London who have not yet sold what is left of their spines." Her hand closed hard over his for a moment. "I could not stop them taking you. I can be a door you walk back through. Do not waste it on grief." It was the most useful thing anyone had given him all day, and they both knew it, and neither of them said so. He put the mirror in the pocket with his wand. "Watch Vane," he told her low, not openly. "He'll be gone from the school within the term. His sort always is once the job's done. Note the day he leaves. It'll matter." She studied him for a long moment, and something in the red-rimmed eyes shifted from grief toward a colder, sharper thing he recognized because it lived in him too. "You are not leaving here broken," she said. It was not quite a question. "No, Professor, good." She drew herself up, the head of Gryffindor to the last. "Then go and learn whatever that place has to teach you, and come back better armed than the men who did this could imagine. I will hold the door." She turned at the threshold. "Potter, your mother would have torn that chamber to the foundations. I think you mean to do it more quietly. I find I prefer your way." Then she was gone, and the Aurors closed back around him, and Harry stood for a moment with a warm brass mirror in his pocket and a colder resolve in his chest than he had walked in with. Then he wrote one letter. He had thought about this on the stairs and decided against the obvious recipients. A letter to Hermione would be intercepted and would only hurt them. A letter to Dumbledore would be read by Dumbledore, which was worse. He wrote instead to the one person in the castle whose mind worked sideways to everyone else, and whose loyalty had never once in 5 years depended on Harry being convenient to believe. "Luna," he wrote, "by the time you read this I'll be gone and you'll have heard the version they're telling. I'm not going to argue it. You either believe me or you don't, and I already know which. I need you to do 3 things, and I need you to do them as though they're not connected because they're being watched. 1. Find out who reassigned Ron's patrol route the week before Quentin was found, not who walked it, who changed it. There'll be a ledger in Filch's office or McGonagall's. The name on the change order matters more than anything Ron said. 2. The book they took from my trunk has a flourish and blots inventory charm in the front cover. Get the title, it'll be in the disciplinary record, which is public to a registered guardian, and you're going to register yourself as a character witness so you can request it. Send me the title. The charm logs the last buyer. The last buyer is one of them. 3. Watch Professor Vane. Don't go near him. Just watch where he goes and who he writes to and when he leaves the castle, and write it down and tell no one you're doing it. He's the one who built this. The undersecretary paid for it. Vane made it. I'm being sent to a school called Nevermore in America. Owls can reach it. I don't know yet what I'm walking into, but I know what I'm walking out of, and I'm not walking out of it for good. I'm going to come back and take every piece of this apart, and the people who did it are going to wish they'd snapped my wand when they had the chance. Thank you for being the one who came to the gate. I saw you. I'll remember it longer than I'll remember the rest of them. He read it once, sealed it, and did not soften a word. The gates of Hogwarts at dusk were iron and old magic, and a ministry coach waited beyond them, black and windowless, with a driver who would not look at him. The Aurors walked him down the long drive in the failing light, and the castle behind him glittered with its 1,000 windows, warm and gold and indifferent, the most beautiful thing he had ever seen and the first place that had ever felt like home, expelling him into the dark for a crime it knew he had not committed because a tired old man had decided he was an acceptable loss. He did not look back at it. He had decided on the stairs that he would not, and he kept the promise to himself, because the promises you keep to yourself when no one is watching are the only ones that ever turn out to matter. One figure waited at the gates. Luna Lovegood stood just inside the iron in her bottle-cap necklace and her radish earrings, her pale hair loose, her expression as serene and strange as it had been the first day he met her, untouched by the storm that had swallowed the rest of the castle. She did not seem to mind the Aurors. She did not seem to mind anything. She held out her hand, and Harry put the letter into it, and her fingers closed over it, and she looked at him with her great pale eyes as though she could see straight through the verdict to the thing underneath. "They've made a mistake," she said, matter of fact, the way she might have remarked on the weather. "People who do this sort of thing always think the dangerous part is over once you've stopped fighting back, but you haven't stopped, have you?" "You've just gone quiet." "No," Harry agreed, "I haven't stopped." "Good." She tucked the letter into her robes as though it were nothing, which was exactly correct. "The place you're going is full of monsters, you know, I read about it. Wolves and gorgons and dead things that walk." She tilted her head. "You'll like it there. It's honest. Here everyone pretends to be a person and turns out to be a monster when it counts. They'll tell you what they are at the door, and then you'll know." The first Auror touched his shoulder. The coach door stood open on a square of dark. "Luna," Harry stopped at the threshold. "The 3 things, as though they're not connected," she said. "I know, I'm very good at things not being connected. It's my best quality." And then, with no change in tone at all, no drama, only the plain certainty of someone reporting a fact she found mildly interesting. "Come back and burn it down, Harry. I'll keep the matches dry." He almost smiled. He got into the coach instead, and the door shut, and the ministry took him down through the gates, and out of the only world he had ever wanted, 3,000 miles toward a school full of monsters who would at least have the courtesy to tell him what they were. The cold thing in his chest had edges now, and the edges were getting sharper, and as the coach rolled into the dark, Harry Potter stopped grieving what he had lost and started, methodically, with the patience of a boy who had all the time in the world and a very good memory, to plan. They had let him keep his wand. They were going to regret it. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, cast out to Nevermore, the portkey deposited him on a cliff road in a cold that smelled of pine and river water, and the first thing Harry Potter saw of America was a wrought iron gate shaped like a raven with its wings spread, and beyond it, black against a sky the color of a bruise, the towers of Nevermore Academy. It was nothing like Hogwarts, and it wanted you to know it. Hogwarts had sprawled, warm and lopsided, 1,000 years of additions piled together like a family that kept having children. Nevermore stood. It rose off its mountain in a single deliberate gesture of black stone and steep slate, its windows narrow and tall and lit from within with a light that was more violet than gold, its roofline a forest of finials and gargoyles that had been carved by someone who took the carving personally. Crows sat on every ledge. The whole building had the composed, unhurried menace of a thing that had decided, long ago, exactly what it was and had never once been tempted to soften the verdict. "They'll tell you what they are at the door," Luna had said, "and then you'll know." The gate opened before he touched it. A woman waited on the gravel of the inner court, tall and pale-haired and immaculate, in a high-collared dress the color of dried blood, and she regarded Harry's arrival with the cool proprietary attention of a curator receiving a new acquisition she had not entirely decided she wanted. She was beautiful in the way of old portraits, and there was something underneath the beauty that did not move when she smiled, and Harry catalogued her the way he now catalogued everyone not safe, not stupid, and not on anyone's side but her own, and understood that this would be the most important relationship in the building. "Mr. Potter," her voice was low and very controlled. "I am Larissa Weems, principal of Nevermore. Welcome to my school." She let them land. "You'll forgive me if I dispense with the speech about new beginnings. I've read your file. I assume you'd find it insulting." "I'd have found it informative," Harry said. "I'd like to know what's in my file." That earned him a flicker of something that might, in a warmer woman, have been the beginning of respect. A conviction, a transfer order under the Confederation's education treaty, a suspended sentence of wand forfeiture, contingent on your remaining in my jurisdiction and out of trouble. She began to walk, and the gravel did not crunch under her feet, which Harry noted, and a great deal that the British ministry chose not to write down, which is always the more interesting half of any file. "I have been doing this a long time, Mr. Potter. I can read the shape of a thing by the hole it leaves." "And what shape do I leave?" "A boy who was very efficiently disposed of by people who were afraid of him." She did not look at him as she said it. "Nevermore is the place they send the children no ordinary school will keep. Werewolves, vampires, sirens, gorgons, the occasional thing that does not have a word yet, outcasts." She stopped at the foot of a great black stair and turned, and now she did look at him, and the look went all the way through. "We are, every one of us, someone the world found easier to send away than to understand. You'll fit, I think. Whether you'll thrive depends entirely on a quality I cannot read from a file, and which I will be watching for with great interest." "Which quality?" "Whether you came here to hide," said Larissa Weems, "or to wait." And she swept up the stair, and Harry followed, and understood that he had just been weighed and not yet found wanting, which was the most generous thing anyone had said to him in a week. The school did not trust him, and the school was right not to, and Harry found the honesty of it almost restful. Word traveled before he did. By the time Weems delivered him to the dim, vaulted refectory where the student body took its evening meal under a ceiling of black rafters and hanging iron lamps, every face in the room already knew that the British transfer was a convicted curse-caster, a wizard among monsters, a boy who had supposedly turned a fellow student's blood to poison in a corridor. They watched him come in. They did not pretend not to. At Hogwarts, the watching had been done sideways, behind hands, in the cowardly grammar of people who wanted the pleasure of judgment without the cost of being caught at it. Here 100 pairs of eyes, some of them not entirely human in their structure, turned to him openly, frankly, and measured him, and turned away when they were done, and the frankness of it was the first thing on 2 continents that had not made him want to put his back to a wall. "Here they'll tell you what they are at the door." He found an empty stretch of bench and sat with his back to stone anyway, because old habits were old for a reason, and he ate and he listened and he learned the room. Nevermore sorted itself by nature, not by house. He could see the lines of it within minutes, a knot of pale, still students who did not eat and watched the candle flames with the patient boredom of people who had a great deal of time, vampires then. A louder, brighter cluster nearer the fire, restless, quick to laugh and quicker to bristle, their movements carrying the half-second too much energy of bodies that wanted to be running, werewolves. A cool, glittering group at the room's social center who held themselves like minor royalty, and to whom the rest of the room kept turning, the way a tide turns, drawn without consent, and Harry watched the drawing happen, watched a third year forget his own sentence mid-word to look at the girl holding court there, and understood siren before he had a name for her. Charm as a literal force. He marked the danger of it and resolved to learn its limits, because a power that worked on you whether you agreed or not was exactly the kind of power that had just cost him everything, and he intended never to lose to it twice. And then there was the girl in black at the far end of the room, sitting entirely alone, and the room arranged itself around her absence the way a field arranges itself around a buried thing. Harry saw her and stopped cataloging, which had not happened in some days. She was small and straight-backed and dressed in unrelieved black, her dark hair in 2 precise braids, her face white and still and composed into an expression of such total glacial indifference that it circled all the way back around to a kind of ferocity. She was eating methodically a bowl of something dark, and she was reading a book propped against a water jug, and she was doing both with the absolute economy of a person who had decided that the rest of the room did not exist and had the will to make the decision stick. No one sat within 10 feet of her. It was not that she had been excluded. Harry could see that at a glance, the way he could see the difference between a wall and a moat. The space around her was not a punishment the room had inflicted on her. It was a perimeter she had drawn, and the room, werewolf and vampire and siren alike, the loud and the cold and the charming, had agreed by unanimous and unspoken vote to respect it because the alternative had been tried and the alternative had not gone well for anyone. "Don't," said a voice beside him. Harry didn't startle. He'd heard the bench take the weight 3 seconds ago and chosen to let it. The speaker was a girl with hair dyed in 2 colors, blue on one side and pink on the other, a werewolf by the restless energy of her and the slightly too sharp smile, and she was looking from Harry to the girl in black with an expression of bright alarm. "Don't what? Don't stare at Wednesday." She said the name the way you'd name a weather event. Last person who stared at Wednesday Adams woke up with a scorpion in his mouth and no memory of how it got there, and the time before that a senior tried to haze her on the second day and they had to dredge the lake. She stuck out a hand, undeterred by her own warning, which Harry decided he liked. "Enid Sinclair, you're the wizard. Everyone's been talking about you for a week. It's been amazing for my social standing just sitting next to you. No offense, are you actually evil? You don't look evil." "You look tired." "I'm not evil," Harry said. "I'm framed, there's a difference, but I'll grant it's hard to see from the outside." Enid blinked. Then, to his mild surprise, she laughed, a real laugh startled out of her, and some of the bright alarm in her face resolved into something warmer and more dangerous to him than suspicion. Because suspicion he knew how to manage and kindness he had no current defenses against. "Okay," she said. "Okay, that's most people lead with how they're definitely the victim of a conspiracy. You led with the difference is hard to see. That's so much better. I'm choosing to find that trustworthy." She lined in, conspiratorial. "Fair warning though, this place eats new kids, especially ones with something to prove and especially ones the Ministry of Wherever dumped here with a black mark. Somebody's going to test you in the next 48 hours. It's basically a law of physics." Enid's gaze flicked involuntarily toward the glittering social center of the room, toward the siren-holding court, and then away, too fast, which told Harry everything. "Just keep your head down the first week," she said. "That's the advice, that's the whole advice." Harry looked at the siren. The siren, as though she had felt the weight of it, looked back. She was beautiful in the specific, weaponized way of her kind, dark-skinned and sharp-eyed, and entirely aware of the room's attention as a resource she owned. And she held Harry's gaze across the refectory with the cool, assessing interest of a predator examining an animal it has not previously had occasion to eat. Then she smiled, slow and certain, and inclined her head a fraction, and the gesture was so precisely a challenge. "I see you, new boy, and I have already decided how this goes," that Harry felt the old cold thing in his chest sharpened toward something almost like gratitude. He had spent a week among people who hid the knife. It was a relief to meet someone who showed it. He inclined his head back, the exact same fraction. "I see you too." The siren's smile widened, pleased, and Harry understood that Enid was right and that the test was coming, and that he would not be keeping his head down, because keeping his head down was a strategy for people who intended to hide, and he had not crossed an ocean to hide. When he glanced back at the far end of the room, the girl in black had set down her book, and Wednesday Adams was looking directly at him. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds. Her face did not change, it was not built, he would learn to change for the convenience of an audience, but the dark eyes moved over him once, top to bottom, with a flat clinical thoroughness that was the precise mirror of his own habit, and Harry had the deeply unfamiliar experience of being catalogued by someone better at it than he was. She was not measuring whether he was dangerous. She had decided that already, and apparently found it uninteresting. She was measuring something else, something he could not name, and whatever she was looking for she seemed fractionally to find, because she picked her book back up and returned to it with the air of a woman who had confirmed a hypothesis and saw no reason to celebrate being right. "Oh no," Enid breathed beside him. "What?" She looked at you. Enid's 2-colored eyes were wide. "She doesn't look at people. She looks at like crime scenes and chemical compounds and once at me, but only because she thought I was a symptom of something. She does not look at people." She grabbed Harry's sleeve with the easy physicality of her kind. "Okay, new plan, forget the siren. The siren's going to be the least of your problems. What did you do?" "I sat down," Harry said. But that wasn't true, and some part of him knew it wasn't, because he had felt the 2 seconds of that flat, dark attention land on him like a hand on the back of the neck. And for the first time since a green window had cut to black in the great hall, he had the distinct sensation of having been recognized, not as the boy who lived, not as the convicted curse-caster, not as anything the world had decided to make of him, but as the thing he actually was underneath all of it. The cold, deliberate thing that had stood up in a converted courtroom and promised a man in London that he would remember the hour. She had seen that. She had looked across a room full of monsters and found the one boy who was running the same equations she was, and she had set him aside for later. Harry returned to his meal, but he kept, at the very edge of his attention, a thread tied to the small, straight-backed girl in black at the end of the room, and he did not let it go for the rest of the night. They gave him a room in the East Tower, narrow and high, with a single tall window that looked out over the black pines, and a bed that someone had made with the indifferent competence of a place that processed a great many transient, unhappy children. He was meant to share it. The other bed was stripped and the wardrobe stood open and empty, and a card on the desk informed him that his assigned roommate had withdrawn from the school in October, for reasons the administration considers closed, which Harry read twice and decided not to think about until he had slept. He did not sleep. He sat on the made bed with his back to the wall and took stock, because taking stock was the thing he did instead of feeling, and it had kept him upright for a week. He had his wand. He had his father's cloak packed deep. He had McGonagall's two-way mirror, cold and brass in his palm, a door back to Britain that he was not yet ready to open. He had a school full of strangers, one principal who had decided to be interested rather than kind, one werewolf who had decided to be kind rather than careful, and one girl in black who had looked at him across a room and seen the part of him that nobody in his old life had ever wanted to look at directly. And he had, most importantly, an enemy with a name and a motive and a clock 3,000 miles away, moving pieces in a chamber Harry could not reach. He could not reach London, but London, it turned out, could reach him. The owl arrived at the tower window an hour before dawn, gray and salt-crusted and furious, having crossed an ocean to deliver its burden, and it bit him twice while he untied the letter and then sat on the windowsill glaring as though the whole crossing had been his personal idea. The handwriting on the parchment was looping and strange and dotted its eyes with small open circles, and the sight of it undid something in Harry's chest that he had been holding clenched since the gates. Harry, Luna had written, "The owls here are watched, so I sent this one from the village under a false name. If it reached you, it means the Watchers haven't worked out the false name yet, which means we have a little time before they do. Use it. Thing the first. I found the patrol ledger." Ron's route was changed 9 days before Quentin was found. The change order is in McGonagall's book, but McGonagall didn't sign it. The signature is Professor Vane's, countersigned by a ministry stamp I didn't recognize, a little serpent eating a key. I copied the stamp onto the back of this page. I think it's important that a defense professor was rearranging prefect patrols 3 weeks into his first term. Defense professors don't do that. Someone wanted Ron in that corridor on that night, and someone wanted it badly enough to forge a routing. Thing the second is taking longer. The book's title is in the sealed half of the record, and the seal is keyed to the Wisengamot, so I can't get it the honest way. I'm working on a dishonest way. Be patient. Thing the third, Vane hasn't left the castle. He teaches his classes, and he's perfectly pleasant, and the younger students adore him, which is the part I dislike most. But twice now he's gone down to the Hog's Head at night and come back smelling of London, which is a long way to go for a drink. I'm watching. I'm glad the school is full of monsters. I told you you'd like it. Right back, so I know the false name still works. Harry read it 3 times. Then he turned the parchment over and looked at the stamp she had copied, a serpent swallowing a key, and felt the cold thing in his chest sharpen into something almost like joy, because a stamp was a thing, a physical object with an owner and a registry and a paper trail, and a forged patrol order in Selwyn Vane's hand was the first solid edge of the machine that had thrown him out of his life. They had been so careful. They had built the trap out of witnesses no court would weigh and evidence no charm would log, and then a man too clever by half had forged one small order to put a jealous boy in a corridor, and signed it because he had not imagined that anyone would ever go looking. Someone had gone looking, a girl with radish earrings who was very good at things not being connected. Harry found ink and a scrap of paper and wrote back 4 lines. The name holds. You're brilliant. The stamp matters more than you know. Keep dry, and tied it to the furious owl's leg, and the owl took it and was gone over the black pines before the first gray of dawn touched them. Then he lay back on the made bed at last, and for the first time since the great hall he let himself feel something other than cold, and the something was not hope exactly, but it was hope's harder, more reliable cousin. The certainty that the thing done to him had been done by hands, and that hands could be found, and that he had already found the first of them. He slept 2 hours. It was enough. He woke with a plan beginning to assemble itself in the back of his mind, and an enemy stamp printed behind his eyes, and the specific patience of a boy who had been thrown a very long way and had decided with total calm to come all the way back. His first class at Nevermore was a lesson in exactly how far he was from home, and Harry took the lesson the way he took all of them now, which was without flinching and with both eyes open. It was held in a stone amphitheater open to the morning sky, and it was called, on the slate schedule Weems had given him, simply Nature's, the study, it transpired, of what each kind of outcast actually was, taught by a gaunt instructor whose own nature Harry could not place and decided not to ask about, since the man's shadow moved a half-second behind him and pooled in ways shadows did not. The class was the school's great melting pot, every kind of student in one ring of stone benches, and the lesson that morning was on thresholds, the moments at which a nature asserted itself and could not be denied, the full moon for the wolf, the first death scent for the vampire, the song that rose unbidden in a siren's throat the first time she wanted something badly enough. Every nature has a threshold, the gaunt instructor said, pacing the floor of the ring while his shadow lagged behind. A line past which the creature stops pretending to be something safer and becomes irreversibly itself. The ordinary world calls this the moment we become monstrous. We call it the moment we stop lying. His pale gaze swept the benches and landed on Harry, the new variable, the wizard among the natures. Our transfer. Your kind hides its threshold better than most. A wand is a very civilized way to be dangerous. It lets you pretend the danger is in the stick and not in the hand. So I'll ask you what I ask everyone on their first day. When did you cross yours? When did you stop lying about what you are? The amphitheater turned to look at him. 100 outcasts waiting to see whether the wizard would perform humility or shrink or bluster. Harry considered the question honestly because it was, he realized, a good one, and he had recently acquired a precise answer to it. About 2 months ago, he said, in a room they'd built to convict me. I'd spent my whole life being the safe version of myself, the one who trusted the adults, who believed the institution would protect me, who thought that being good was the same as being safe. And then I watched the people who were supposed to keep me decide I was an acceptable loss, and something in me crossed a line and didn't come back. He met the instructor's pale gaze without difficulty. I stopped expecting to be saved. I started planning to save myself. The wand was never where my danger lived, you're right about that. The danger-s in the part of me that did the arithmetic right back at them cold while they thought I was breaking. That's my nature. I'm the thing that doesn't break and doesn't forgive and doesn't forget the arithmetic. I crossed that threshold in a converted great hall, and I've been on the other side of it ever since, and I'm not lying about it anymore. Is that the answer you wanted? The amphitheater had gone very quiet. Gaunt instructor regarded him for a long moment, and his lagging shadow seemed briefly to catch up. It's the answer I never get on a first day, the instructor said. Most of them describe a transformation, a moon, a fang, a song. You described a decision. Something that might have been approval crossed the gaunt face. Those are the most dangerous natures of all, the ones that aren't given by blood but chosen under pressure, because a nature you were born with has limits, and a nature you chose has none. You'll do well here, transfer, or you'll do something far more interesting than well. Sit. He resumed his pacing. The rest of you attend. He's just demonstrated the only threshold that frightens me. The wolf changes once a month and is the rest of the time a person. A boy who decides under betrayal to become the thing that does the arithmetic back, that boy never changes again. He's simply permanently awake. The pale gaze flicked once more to Harry. Pray you stay on the right side of him. Most of you won't have to, one or two of you might. When the class broke, Harry felt the school's reading of him shift again, not toward fear exactly, but toward the wary respect that outcasts paid to a nature they recognized, and he gathered his slate and climbed out of the stone ring into the cold, bright morning with the distinct sensation of having been, for the first time in his life, correctly identified in public and not punished for it. At Hogwarts, the truth of what he was had been a thing to manage, to soften, to apologize for. Here a man whose shadow lagged behind him had asked him to name it in front of 100 monsters, and the naming had cost him nothing, and the monsters had nodded as though he'd merely confirmed the weather. Here they'll tell you what they are at the door, Luna had said. They had. And then that morning they had asked Harry to do the same, and he had, and the door had simply let him through. He did not yet know that a small, straight-backed girl in black had been sitting at the very top of the amphitheater, in the seat where the morning light didn't reach, and that she had not been enrolled in Natures for 2 years, and that she had come that morning for one reason, which was to hear the wizard answer the threshold question, and that when he had answered it with a decision instead of a transformation, something in Wednesday Addams had marked the day as the one on which a hypothesis became a certainty. He would learn it later, for now he only walked out into the cold, a little less alone than he had been the day before, and went to learn the geometry of the school that had, without his noticing, already begun to become a home. The test came faster than 48 hours. It came the next afternoon in the courtyard in front of an audience, which told Harry it had been arranged. He had spent the morning learning the school's geometry the way he had once learned Hogwarts's, corridors, sightlines, the doors that locked and the ones that only looked like they did. Nevermore taught the ordinary subjects sideways. Its potions were brewed in a greenhouse full of plants that turned to watch you. Its history was taught by a portrait that had witnessed most of it and disliked all of it. Magic here was not the wand magic of Britain, but 100 different inheritances, a werewolf's transformation, a siren's song, a gorgon's stone gaze, the slow, cold arts of the vampire clans, and the curriculum treated Harry's discipline as one tradition among many rather than the only one that counted, which was a humility the wizarding world had never once shown anyone. He liked it. He hadn't expected to like anything for a while. He distrusted the liking and kept walking. The The courtyard was a square of frost-rimed flagstones enclosed by cloisters, and the siren was waiting in the center of it when Harry crossed on his way from the greenhouse, and she had brought friends. 4 of them ranged behind her in a loose crescent, the casual choreography of people who have done this before. The siren herself sat on the rim of a dry fountain with the unhurried ease of a queen receiving a petition. "Bianca Barclay," she said, by way of opening. Her voice did the thing sirens' voices did. Harry felt it reach for the soft place behind his sternum, the place that wanted to agree with her, wanted to be liked by her, wanted to do whatever would make her smile. He noted the reach the way you note a hand going for your pocket, and he set his weight against it, and he did not let it find purchase. "You're the wizard, I run things here. I thought we should establish that early before you got ideas." "You're a siren," Harry said, your voice pulls. "You're using it right now low under the words to make me pliable before you've asked for anything. It's elegant work, I'd compliment it if it were going to land." He stopped walking and faced her and let her see that the soft place behind his sternum had a door and the door was shut. "It isn't going to land, so let's skip to the part where you tell me what you actually want." A ripple went through the crescent behind her. Bianca's eyes narrowed, not in anger, he saw, but in recalculation, which was more dangerous and more interesting. People who got angry when their first move failed were amateurs. People who got curious were the ones to watch. "Most people can't tell when I'm doing it," she said. "Most people haven't recently lost everything to power that worked on them whether they agreed or not," Harry said. "It focuses the attention." She slid off the fountain's rim. The crescent tightened. "Here's what I want, wizard. This school runs on a hierarchy, and the hierarchy runs through me, and new arrivals, especially ones with a reputation, have a way of upsetting things if they don't learn their place on day one. So this is a lesson, nothing personal." She tilted her head, and the 4 behind her began with the loose confidence of repetition to spread. "Curtis here is a werbear, genuinely. The other 3 are going to make sure you stay put while he explains the local etiquette. By the time the staff get here, you'll have learned it, and we'll all tell the same story about how the dangerous British cursecaster started it. Your word against 5, and your word these days isn't worth much, is it?" It was, Harry conceded, a well-built little trap. She had even given herself the cover story in advance. She was not stupid. She was a smaller, cruder schoolyard echo of Corvin Ashbury, and the echo told him something useful, which was that the architecture of Frame the Dangerous One, control the witnesses, weaponize his reputation, was not unique to London. It was just how the world worked when the strong wanted something from the inconvenient. He had let it work on him once because he had not seen it coming. He saw this one coming. "You've thought about this carefully," Harry said. "I respect that, so I'm going to be fair and tell you the 3 things you got wrong, because you're clearly capable of learning and it would be a waste otherwise." He had not moved, and his stillness had begun to register on the crescent as something other than fear. "1. You assumed I'd defend myself, so you brought enough bodies to overwhelm a defense, but I'm not going to defend myself. Defending is reactive. I'm going to do the other thing." He drew his wand slowly, openly, so they could all watch it happen and understand that watching it would not help them. 2. You staged this in the open courtyard for the audience, for the witnesses to your story. But an audience cuts both ways. 40 people are watching from those cloisters right now, and they're about to watch 5 upperclassmen rush 1 transfer student who's standing perfectly still. Whatever happens next, that's the image they keep. You've already lost the witnesses. "You just don't know it yet." Curtis, the werbear, glanced at Bianca for the signal, and Bianca's confidence had developed for the first time a hairline crack. "What's the 3rd thing?" she said. "The 3rd thing," Harry said, "is that I'm not the most dangerous person who's been paying attention to this conversation." He had known for 90 seconds. He had felt the geometry of the courtyard change when a particular column of the cloister acquired a particular shadow, and he had drawn the confrontation out, the 3 things, the slow wand, the lesson on audiences, not because he needed the time to win, but because he had wanted to see whether his read on the girl in black had been correct, and whether she would come, and what she would do when she did. Wednesday Addams stepped out of the cloister's shadow into the frostlight, and the courtyard went very quiet. She did not hurry. She crossed the flagstones with the unbothered precision of a metronome, and in her right hand, held down along the line of her skirt where it had not been a moment before, was a fencing foil, except that Harry, who had learned this week to look at the details people wanted you to miss, saw that the button had been removed from the tip, and the tip had been honed. The thing in Wednesday Addams's hand was not a sporting implement, but a 35-inch needle of tempered steel that she carried with the boneless familiarity of a 4th limb. "Bianca." Her voice was a flat contralto, entirely without inflection, and somehow it carried further than Bianca's siren-pitched alto had. "You're using the new one for a power display, crude, predictable. You always reach for theater when you're frightened, which is most of the time, which is why you'll never run anything that matters." She came to a stop precisely at Harry's shoulder, not in front of him, he noted, which would have made him something she was protecting, but beside him, level, which made them something else. "I've decided he's not yours to make an example of." "This isn't your business, Addams," Bianca said, but the crack in her confidence had become a fault line, and her 4 upperclassmen had stopped spreading and started, very slightly, to drift back together, which is what prey does. Everything in this school is my business when I find it interesting, Wednesday said. I find him interesting. You are about to make him more interesting by being the occasion of your own humiliation, and I'd hate for that to happen by accident when it could happen on purpose. She turned her head fractionally, the dark eyes settling on the Werber. Curtis, you broke your wrist in the autumn fencing trials when I disarmed you. It set badly. I can hear it click when you make a fist. Make a fist now and I'll teach you what badly means. She let one beat pass. Or you could all decide that the courtyard is cold and the lesson is over, and Bianca thought of something more important to do. I choose quickly. My patience is a finite resource, and I've spent most of today's on this sentence. For 3 full seconds the courtyard balanced on the edge of violence. Harry watched Bianca run the same calculation he would have run in her place, and arrive at the same answer. 5 against 2 was a fine ratio when the two were a tired transfer and a girl with a sword, right up until you remembered that one of the two had dredged a senior out of the lake, and the other had just dismantled your trap to your face in front of the entire school, and that the 40 witnesses you'd assembled to validate your story were now going to validate a very different story instead. The arithmetic of the thing had inverted while she wasn't looking. She was, Harry thought, smart enough to see it and smart enough to hate seeing it, and just smart enough to know that the only move left that preserved any of her standing was to pretend she'd chosen it. You're not worth the detention, Bianca told Harry, with the lofty disdain of a general announcing a strategic withdrawal. She gathered her crescent with a look and swept toward the cloisters, and the 40 witnesses parted for her, and every one of them understood exactly what had happened, which was the opposite of what she'd intended, and she would feel the weight of that understanding on her back the whole way out. The courtyard began slowly to empty. Harry put his wand away. He had not cast a single spell. That, he reflected, was the most useful afternoon's work he'd done in a long time. A fight won, and the whole school taught that the British transfer didn't need to raise his wand to end a confrontation, and all of it accomplished by standing still and letting other people's certainty defeat them. It was the Ashbury method run in reverse, and it had felt, he was aware, very good, and he distrusted how good it had felt. He turned to the girl beside him. Wednesday Addams was already looking at him, the sharpened foil now somewhere out of sight, her white face composed into its habitual expression of Arctic disinterest. But the dark eyes were not disinterested. The dark eyes were doing the catalogue again, the flat, clinical sweep, and this close Harry could see that it was not cold the way Bianca's contempt was cold. It was cold the way deep water was cold, a property of depth, not of cruelty, a sign of how far down the thing went rather than how little lived in it. You knew I was there, she said. It was not a question. Behind the column, you stretched the confrontation to confirm it. You used Bianca's own ambush as an instrument to observe me. Yes, most people would lie about that. They'd say they were grateful. They'd make me their rescuer so they could owe me something small instead of something real. Her head tilted, the precise degree of a scientist adjusting a lens. You used me. You watched me the way I watched you. I'm not accustomed to being the specimen. A pause. I find I don't entirely dislike it. I didn't think you'd come, Harry said. I thought you might. I wanted to know. Why does it matter whether I come? And here was the question under the question, and Harry, who had spent a week being lied to by everyone he had ever trusted, found that he had run completely out of any desire to be anything other than exact. Because I'm 3,000 miles from home in a school where I have nothing and no one and a conviction following me like a smell, he said, and I'm going to need an ally who's more dangerous than I am, and you're the only person in this building who looked at me and saw the actual thing instead of the reputation. I'd rather know now whether that person is someone who comes when it matters, or someone who watches from the shadows and lets the world happen. It's a load-bearing distinction. I've recently learned how much. Something moved behind the dark eyes, not warmth. He would not have believed warmth, and its absence was, perversely, the most reassuring thing about her. What moved was interest, sharpening towards something that had not quite arrived yet, a verdict still being assembled. You were betrayed, Wednesday said, comprehensively, by people who were supposed to be incapable of it. It's in the way you stand. You keep your back to stone and your wand hand free, and you don't expect anyone in a room to be on your side, and you've held those habits long enough that they've stopped being habits and started being architecture. Someone built that into you very recently and very thoroughly. She studied him. You've been thrown away, yes, by the people who were meant to keep you. Yes, for the first time, Wednesday Addams's expression changed. It was not a smile. Harry would learn that she smiled perhaps twice a year, and that both times were worse than the alternative, but something in the still white face settled, the way a predator settles when it has finally identified, out of all the moving shapes in a field, the one that is worth the effort of the hunt. I find that interesting, she said. And the way she said it, flat, certain, with the weight of a sentence handed down rather than a sentiment offered, made it the least sentimental and most binding thing anyone had said to Harry Potter in his life. And he understood, standing in the emptying courtyard in the American cold, that the most dangerous student in the school had just decided something about him, and that whatever she had decided, the deciding was already done. Come with me, Wednesday said, and turned and walked and did not look back to see whether he followed. Harry followed. That too he distrusted. He went anyway. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. The claim Wednesday Addams's room was a museum of intentions, and Harry read it the way he had read the converted Great Hall, because a person's space tells you what they have decided to be when no one is making them perform. She had a roommate Enid by the riot of color on one half of the room, a galaxy of fairy lights and pastel and stuffed animals that stopped, abruptly, at an invisible line down the floor's center as though it had run into a wall of disapproval and frozen. Wednesday's half was black and white and ruthless, a desk with a typewriter, a wall of pinned papers, newspaper clippings, photographs, a map of something stuck through with red thread. A shelf of books on poisons, on unsolved murders, on the anatomy of the human hand. A single window, uncurtained, looking out at the same black pines as his own. There was a cello in the corner and a beehive in a glass case on the sill and a severed hand sitting on the desk, and the severed hand was alive, and it sat up when Harry entered and regarded him with the alert attention of a guard dog deciding whether to bite. Thing, Wednesday said without looking at it. He's mine. Don't strangle him in his sleep, I'll know. Yours, Harry repeated. My family's, he travels with me. He opens locks, carries messages, and keeps counsel better than anyone with a face. The hand made a small, complicated gesture, fingers flickering through shapes too fast to follow, and Wednesday's mouth did something that was not a smile. He says you have the eyes of a person who is planning a funeral and hasn't decided whose. He approves. Thing has excellent judgment and no taste. Harry looked at the hand. The hand, after a moment's evaluation, extended its index finger toward him in what was unmistakably an offer, and Harry, who had stopped being surprised by anything roughly the moment a green window cut to black in the great hall, reached out and shook it gravely, one finger, and felt the small, dry strength of the grip and the cool intelligence behind it. Now he likes you, Wednesday said. This is a problem. He's an appalling judge of who's safe. He liked the boy in October. What happened to the boy in October? I'm not permitted to discuss it pending the inquest. She crossed to the wall of pinned papers and stood before it with her back to him, and her stillness changed quality, became the stillness of someone choosing words rather than withholding them. Sit, we're going to have a conversation, and I dislike conversations conducted while one party is standing in a doorway deciding whether to bolt. You won't bolt. You crossed an ocean toward this, not away from it. Sit down and let's both stop pretending we don't already understand the shape of what's happening here. Harry sat on the edge of Enid's riotous bed, the only neutral ground in the room, and Wednesday turned from the wall and looked at him, and the conversation that followed was the strangest of his life, because for the first time in as long as he could remember he was talking to someone who did not want anything from him except the truth, and who would know instantly if he gave her anything else. I'm going to tell you what I see, she said. You'll correct the errors, there won't be many. Then we'll decide what we are to each other, and we'll be honest about it, because the alternative is the thing everyone else does, which is to perform an alliance while privately keeping score, and I'd rather drink lie. She folded her hands. You were convicted of a crime you did not commit, not falsely accused, convicted, with process and evidence and a verdict, which means someone with resources and patience built the case against you brick by brick. The evidence was physical and it was planted. The witnesses were real people saying true things arranged to imply a false one. And the authority that should have protected you chose not to, for reasons it found sufficient, which is the part that's hollowed you out, not the enemies you can use, but the protector who ran the numbers and spent you. Tell me where I'm wrong. You're not wrong anywhere, Harry said. You're wrong about one emphasis. You said someone built the case against me. It's bigger than that. They didn't build a case to punish me. They built it to replace me, to take what was mine while I was too discredited and too far away to hold it. The conviction is a means, the theft is the point. Wednesday went very still. Then slowly she inclined her head, and Harry had the sense of having passed some examination he hadn't known he was sitting. Better, she said. You understand that the cruelty is administrative. That's rarer than you'd think. Most victims believe their suffering was the goal. They make themselves the center of the story. You've understood that you were never the center. You were an obstacle, removed efficiently, by people who'd have removed a tree the same way if the tree had been standing where they wanted to build. Something flickered in the dark eyes. That's the thinking of someone I can work with. Most people are too in love with their own pain to be useful. And you, Harry said. You've catalogued me twice across a room and dismantled a siren's ambush to claim me as your business, and I still don't know what you want, which is unusual, because I'm generally good at that. You're good at it with people who want ordinary things. She moved to the desk and laid one hand flat on the typewriter, an absent gesture, the only unconsidered thing he'd seen her do. I'll tell you what I want because I despise being a mystery. It's lazy. I am, by the unanimous and correct assessment of this school, the most dangerous student in it. I have been dangerous my entire life. It is not a costume, and it is not a phase, and it is not, whatever the counselors keep writing in their reports, a cry for help. It's simply the shape of me. And the consequence of being the shape of me is that I am always, everywhere alone, not lonely. I find loneliness a useful condition and recommend it. but alone because everyone I meet is either prey or predator who wants to mate or compete, or a coward performing tolerance while privately terrified. There are 3 categories, and I exhausted their interest years ago. She turned, and the dark eyes pinned him. You're a 4th thing. You walked into a room full of monsters with a conviction on your back and no allies, and you didn't perform innocence, didn't beg, didn't shrink. You stood with your back to the stone and ran equations and let the room wonder. And when a siren ambushed you, you didn't fight, you used the ambush to study me, because you'd correctly identified that the most valuable resource in this building wasn't safety, it was an ally who was worse than you are. Her voice did not warm, but it sharpened toward something almost appetitive. You looked at the most dangerous person in the school and saw an asset, not a threat to flee, not a queen to flatter, an instrument to acquire. That's how I look at the world. I have never once met someone who looked back at me the same way. I find it, she paused, selecting the word with surgical care. I find it the most interesting thing that has happened to me in years. And I have been to 2 funerals and a poisoning this term. So this is mutual use, Harry said. You want an equal, I want an ally more dangerous than I am. We're each other's missing tool. Don't reduce it. For the first time, something like an edge of feeling crossed the white face, gone almost before he saw it. Use is the foundation. It's the only honest foundation. Everything built on sentiment rots. But I'm not offering you a transaction, Harry Potter. I'm offering you the thing transactions are too small to name. She came toward him unhurried and stopped close enough that he could see the chips of darker black in her eyes. I'm claiming you. Do you understand the difference? An ally you keep while it's convenient. A possession you defend past the point of convenience because it's yours, and the world does not get to take what's yours, not twice, not while you're standing. I've decided you're mine. Not to own, I'd find a thing I own tedious within a week, but to keep. The way you keep a blade you've decided is the only one balanced for your hand. The dark eyes did not blink. Every person who threw you away is going to learn what they discarded. I'm going to enjoy teaching them. And I'm going to do it at your side as your equal, because I don't stand behind anyone and I don't stand in front of anyone, and I have never, until now, found anyone worth standing beside. The room was very quiet. The hand on the desk had gone still. Outside, a crow said something to the dawn. Harry looked at her, at the small, straight-backed girl in unrelieved black who had just offered him, in the flattest voice imaginable and without a single soft word, the only loyalty he had been given since his life ended, and he understood that she meant every syllable, and that her meaning it was worth more than all the warmth Hogwarts had ever shown him, because warmth was cheap and had failed him, and this was not warmth. This was iron. This was a person telling him in the only language she had that she had looked at a discarded boy and decided the discarding was an error she intended personally to correct. I need to be clear about something, Harry said, because he had learned the price of unclear things. I'm not a project. I'm not a wounded creature you're nursing for the satisfaction of it. If we do this, it's level. I'll match you. I won't be carried and I won't be managed, and the day you try to handle me is the day this ends. Obviously, she said it with such flat contempt for the alternative that it was, somehow, the most reassuring thing she'd said yet. If I wanted something to carry, I'd buy a cat. I want a pier. Piers are load-bearing. They hold up their half or the structure fails. She extended her hand, her own, pale and cool, the gesture so precisely the offer of an equal that Harry understood she had chosen it over every warmer one available. Level, matched, yours and mine. The people who did this to you against the 2 of us, say yes and stop deliberating. You decided in the courtyard, you're only confirming it now, and confirmation should be efficient. Harry took her hand. Yes, he said. Her grip was cold and dry and exactly as strong as his own, and neither of them let go too quickly, and when they did it was at precisely the same moment, in that synchrony, 2 people releasing a handshake on the same heartbeat without a signal passing between them, told Harry more about what he had just agreed to than any of the words had. Good, Wednesday said. Now show me your wand. I need to touch it, and you're not going to like why. Why won't I like it? Harry asked, but he was already drawing the wand from his pocket. Because I'm going to have a vision, and they're unpleasant for everyone present, especially me. Wednesday flexed her pale fingers. I see things, the future, the past, the truth under a lie I have no control over which, and the gift treats me like a door it kicks open whenever it pleases. When I touch an object soaked in a strong enough event, it shows me the event. Your wand was at the center of the thing that destroyed your life. If I touch it, I'll see some piece of what was done to you. I won't be able to choose the piece, and I'll come out of it on the floor, probably, which I require you not to comment on. You're offering to hurt yourself to confirm something I already know. I'm offering to acquire evidence, she corrected. You know you're innocent. Knowing is worthless. I've watched 100 innocent people drown in their own certainty. What we need is what happened, the specific hands, the specific room, the face of the man who built the trap. I might see it. I might see nothing useful, but the gift has never once shown me a comfortable thing, which suggests it has good aim. She held out her hand. Give it to me before I reconsider. I dislike reconsidering. It's a sign of a disordered mind. Harry put his wand in her palm. For a moment nothing happened. Wednesday closed her fingers around the holly and shut her eyes, and her white face went slack, and then it went wrong, the muscles of it pulling taut, the breath stopping, the dark head snapping back as though something had struck her under the chin. The fairy lights on Enid's half of the room stuttered. The beehive in its glass case began, very faintly, to hum. And Wednesday Addams stood rigid in the center of her ruthless half of the room with Harry's wand clenched, white-knuckled in her fist, and saw something that made the tendons stand out in her neck. When it released her, she did not fall. Harry had moved to catch her. He found he had crossed the room without deciding to, and she put out her free hand and stopped him with a flat palm against his chest, refusing the catch with the last of her strength, and stood swaying on her own feet by pure contemptuous will until the swaying passed. Then she opened her eyes, and they were entirely black, and they cleared slowly to their ordinary darkness, and when she spoke her flat voice was rougher than before. "A room," she said, "stone tall. Not your courtroom, somewhere underneath, somewhere older. A man with a long, clever face and pale eyes holding two wands, yours and another. He laid them tip to tip and he spoke into them, not a spell, a recording. He was teaching the wand a lie, the way you teach a parrot, over and over until the holly learned to remember a thing it had never done. Her hand tightened on the wand. He primed it, days before. He emptied your wand of its real history and he wrote a false memory into it, and he sealed it so the sealing would hold exactly until someone performed a priori incantatum in a crowded room. Your wand didn't cast that curse. Your wand was forged the way a document is forged, and the forgery was keyed to perform itself on cue. The black eyes found his. I saw his hands, I'd know them again, long fingers, a signet ring, a serpent, swallowing something, a key, I think. The room tilted very slightly around Harry and then steadied, and the steadying was the cold, clean steadiness of a man who has just had his most important hypothesis confirmed by a witness who cannot be bought. "A serpent swallowing a key," he said. "You're certain?" "I'm never uncertain about what I see. I'm only uncertain about what it means." She frowned. "You recognize it. Luna sent me a copy of that exact stamp this morning. It's on a forged patrol order in the man's own hand, Professor Selwyn Vane, Defense Against the Dark Arts, seconded to Hogwarts 3 weeks before the crime he then volunteered to investigate. He's the one who performed the priori in the courtroom and stopped it after one spell." Harry took the wand back from her, and the holly was warm now, warm from her grip and from whatever she had wrung out of it. "You just described him priming the wand in a room under the school." "That's the missing mechanism. I knew the priori was doctored. I didn't know how. Now I do, and now I know it leaves a signature. You can't write a false memory into a wand without leaving the marks of the writing if you know to look for them." He was already 3 moves ahead, the board assembling itself in the cold, clear space behind his eyes. Vane built the trap. The Serpentine key is a ministry seal, a department, a faction, an office. Find the office that owns that seal and you find the man who paid Vane, and I already know his name. I just can't yet prove the line that connects them. Then we prove it. Wednesday lowered herself into the chair at her desk, the only concession she would make to having just had her skull kicked open by the future, and regarded him with the flat black intensity that he was beginning to understand was, for her, the equivalent of another person leaning forward in excitement. "You have a method. I can see it working behind your face. Tell me the method." 3 lines of attack. Harry began to pace slowly, the wand turning in his fingers, the plan speaking itself as he assembled it. 1. The physical evidence. The wand has a forgery signature. The planted book has a flourish and blots buyer log. The bile vial and the binding cord came from somewhere with a supplier and a ledger. Every object in that frame is a thread back to a hand. 2. The people. Vane forged a patrol order to put Ron in the corridor. That's a documented act, a signature, a crime in itself. Ron gave false testimony, and Ron is weak and guilty and will break if leaned on correctly. Quentin Ashbury was cursed nearly to death, except a near-fatal bile curse doesn't leave you walking by Christmas, and I'd bet my wand he was never as close to dying as they sold it, which means there's a healer's record that doesn't match the story. 3. The motive. Someone is right now in London, moving to administer the vacant interests of a convicted absentee minor. Find who filed that motion and you found the man the whole machine was built to enrich. The Serpentine key seal will name him. I already believe it's a Wisengamot undersecretary called Corvin Ashbury, Quentin's uncle, conveniently, but belief isn't proof, and I don't move until it's proof. "You're enjoying this," Wednesday observed. Harry stopped pacing. He considered the accusation honestly, the way she'd want him to. "Yes," he admitted, "I shouldn't. A week ago they took everything I had, but yes, because for the first time since the Great Hall I'm not the thing being done to, I'm the thing doing." He met the black eyes. "That probably says something unflattering about me." "It says you're useful," Wednesday said, "which is the only flattering thing worth saying about anyone. Sit down, we're not finished. There's a 4th line of attack you haven't named, and you haven't named it because it's the one that costs you something, and you're treating it like the others, as a problem to be solved. It isn't a problem, it's a wound, and you're going to walk into it badly if you keep pretending it's a chess piece." Harry went still. "The headmaster, the man who ran the numbers and spent you." Her voice did not soften. He was learning that it never would, and that the not softening was a kind of respect, a refusal to handle him. He's not on your list of hands because he didn't build the trap, but he let it close. He's the reason it worked. And when this is over, when you've proven every line and broken every hand, you're still going to have to stand in front of that old man and decide what to do with the fact that the person who was supposed to keep you looked at the arithmetic and decided you were affordable. You can't outdeduce that. There's no signature to find. There's just the wound and the choice you make about it. I'm telling you now so it doesn't ambush you later. I dislike being ambushed and I extend the courtesy. For a long moment Harry said nothing. Outside the uncurtained window the dawn had come up gray and final over the black pines, and somewhere below them the school was waking, and 3,000 miles away a man with a serpent on his ring was teaching a courtroom that a boy was a monster. I'll deal with the headmaster, Harry said at last, when I've earned the right to, not before. If I confront him now, I'm a wronged child demanding to be believed. If I confront him with every line proven and the whole machine broken in my hands, I'm something else. He looked at her. I'm the verdict. Something in Wednesday Addams's white face settled, the way it had in the courtyard, the predator settled, the recognition. That, she said, is the correct answer. I'm pleased. I'm rarely pleased. Note it for the unlikely event that anyone asks what pleases me. She rose, steady now, the vision's aftermath burned off by the work of planning. We begin today. Thing can reach places people can't, locks, ledgers, the inside of sealed rooms. Enid has a network. She talks to everyone and everyone tells her things and she remembers all of it under the noise. I have certain skills the curriculum doesn't list, and you have a method and a wand they were stupid enough to leave you. Her mouth did the thing that wasn't a smile. It's a good war band, small, but the best ones are. The school learned by lunch that the British transfer was Wednesday Addams's, and the learning rearranged everything. Harry watched it happen from the refectory bench, sitting now at the far end where Wednesday sat, in the perimeter that the whole school had agreed to respect, and he watched the room recalculate him in real time. Yesterday he had been a curiosity with a black mark, fair game, a thing a siren could ambush in a courtyard for sport. Today he sat inside Wednesday Addams's moat, and the moat extended to cover him, and 100 monsters who would cheerfully have tested a lone wizard looked at the lone wizard sitting at the right hand of the girl who had dredged the lake and decided, unanimously and without discussion, that they had urgent business elsewhere. It's obscene how fast it works, Enid said, dropping onto the bench across from them with the fearlessness of the genuinely warm. She had attached herself to the warband that morning with the simple announcement that she'd always wanted to be in something with stakes and had refused all attempts to dissuade her. 2 days ago people were taking bets on how long you'd last. Now Yoko asked me if you and Wednesday are like a thing, and I didn't know what to say because Wednesday told me if I speculated about her personal life again, she'd replace my blood with embalming fluid in my sleep, which fair. We're a unit, Wednesday said, without looking up from the autopsy report she was reading at the table as though it were a menu. The nature of the unit is not a subject for the cafeteria. Eat your unsettling pink food, Enid. But the question had landed in the room's air, and Harry was aware of it landing, and he was aware, with the part of him that catalogued everything, that he did not have a clean answer to it, and that the lack of a clean answer was a thing he would have to examine later when there was time, which there currently was not. What he and Wednesday were did not have a word in the languages he knew. Allies was too small. Friends was wrong in a way he couldn't yet articulate. Claimed was the word she'd used, and it was closer than the others, and it should have alarmed him and instead settled something in his chest that had been unsettled since the gates of Hogwarts. He set it aside. There was a war to plan. The reckoning with Bianca came that afternoon, and it came, as Wednesday had predicted, because Bianca was the kind of person who could not let a public defeat stand, and lacked the wit to recognize that doubling down would only deepen it. She caught them in the cloister, Harry and Wednesday, walking, thing riding in the deep pocket of Wednesday's coat, and she had brought no crescent of upperclassmen this time, only herself and a cold smile, which told Harry she'd come to talk rather than to fight, which was, in its way, more dangerous. Adams. Bianca's voice did its under the words pull reflexive, the way another person might square their shoulders. Slumming. I'd heard you collect broken things, but a convict, even for you that's a reach. What's the appeal? Does it make you feel powerful, having a pet that the rest of the world already decided to throw out? Harry felt Wednesday go still beside him, and he understood, with a small cold thrill, that he was about to watch the most dangerous student in the school do the thing that had earned her the title. She did not raise her voice. She did not draw the sharpened foil. She simply turned the full flat weight of her attention onto Bianca Barclay and spoke, in the contralto monotone, words selected with the precision of a surgeon choosing where to cut. Your power works on the weak-willed and the unprepared, Wednesday said. You've built an entire identity on a parlor trick that fails the instant someone decides not to be charmed, which is why you surround yourself with people too frightened to make that decision, and why it terrifies you when someone does. Harry made that decision in the courtyard in front of the whole school, and you've never recovered, and you never will, because the one thing a siren cannot survive is being publicly unlistened to. She tilted her head, the lens adjusting. You called him a broken thing the world threw out. You're describing what you fear. You think your whole court would scatter the day your voice stopped working, and you're correct. He lost everything and he's still standing without a single ally but the ones he's chosen. You have 100 followers and you'd be alone inside an hour if they could resist you. He's the free one, Bianca. You're the pet. You're just the pet of your own gift and the leash is your own throat. A pause, perfectly weighted. I don't collect broken things. I collect things that don't break. It's a much shorter list and you're not on it, and the fact that that wound landed is the proof. Bianca Barclay's face went through several colors and arrived at white. She opened her mouth. The siren pull surged, reaching, desperate, the reflex of a cornered thing, and Wednesday simply waited, unmoved, unmoving, a stone the song broke against, and Bianca heard her own gift fail in real time against the one person in the school it had never worked on, and the failure was so total and so public. 3 first-years had stopped in the far arch to watch, that there was nothing left to do but leave. She left. She did it with her chin up, which Harry respected, because it was the only dignity available, and she took it. You enjoyed that, Harry said when she'd gone, enormously. Wednesday resumed walking as though nothing had happened. She'll be more careful now, which makes her more useful as a barometer. Cruel people who learn caution become very precise instruments for measuring exactly how much someone fears you. We may need her later. I've left the door open by a crack. Always leave the door open by a crack. Corpses can't be recruited. Harry looked at the small, straight-backed girl beside him, walking through the cold cloister with a living hand in her pocket and a dismantled enemy in her wake, and felt something he had not felt since before the Great Hall, something he distrusted and did not set aside this time, the specific, dangerous comfort of not being alone. Wednesday, he said, thank you for the claim, for meaning it. But it plainly because she despised anything else. I've had a week of people who were sorry. You're the first one who did anything. She walked 3 more steps before she answered, and when she did, her flat voice did not change at all, which was how he knew she meant it most. I don't do regret, Wednesday Adams said. It's a way of feeling responsible without doing anything, and I find it contemptible. I do consequences. She glanced at him, sidelong, the black eyes unreadable. You're mine now. The people who threw you away made a list of everything they could take, and they missed one item, and the item they missed is going to cost them all the others. Come, we have a war to start, and I want to begin before dinner. I've found that revenge, like all things, is best undertaken on a full stomach and a clear schedule. Larissa Weems summoned them both before dinner, which Harry had expected, because a school did not watch a siren's ambush collapse in its courtyard, and a queen bee's reign break in its cloister within 30 hours of a transfer's arrival without the principal wishing to understand the new variable. Her office occupied the highest room of the central tower, round and tall and lined with books in glass cases, the violet light of the school pooling on a desk of black wood the size of a coffin lid. She did not invite them to sit. She stood at the window with her back to them, looking out over her domain of pines and crows, and let the silence work, which was a technique Harry recognized and admired because it was his own. In 4 days, Weems said without turning, Mr. Potter has resisted a siren's compulsion, dismantled an upperclassman's authority without raising his wand, and acquired the protection of the one student in this school whom I cannot, by any ordinary means, control. She turned at last, and her composed face had something underneath it that did not move. And Miss Adams, who has spent 2 years informing me with great consistency that she requires no alliances and prefers the company of the dead, has acquired a partner. I have run this school a long time. I have learned to be very interested when the immovable things start moving. So, tell me what you are, the two of you. Before the rest of the building invents an answer, I'll have to spend the term disproving. We're a unit, Wednesday said in the flat voice that did not negotiate. Its purpose is our own. We've broken no rule of yours and we don't intend to, provided your rules and our purpose don't collide. If they do, you'll be the first to know, which is more courtesy than most receive from me. That is not reassuring, Miss Adams. It wasn't meant to be reassuring. It was meant to be true. I assumed you'd prefer the second thing. Wednesday held the principal's gaze without a flicker. You said you cannot control me by ordinary means. You're correct, and we both know it, so let's not waste an evening pretending otherwise. What you can do is decide whether I'm a problem you manage or an instrument you tolerate. Tolerate me. I'm cheaper than the alternative, and I clean up after myself. Something flickered across Weems' face that might, in a less governed woman, have been amusement. She let it pass and turned the full weight of her attention on Harry instead. Mr. Potter. I'll be direct because Miss Adams has poisoned the room against indirection. She crossed to the desk and laid one long pale hand flat upon a sealed letter that lay there, and Harry's eyes went to it before he could stop them, because the wax that sealed it bore an impression he had seen that very morning copied onto the back of Luna's parchment, a serpent swallowing a key. I received this an hour after you arrived, from a department of your ministry whose name I will not dignify by reading aloud. It requests in the elaborate, threatening grammar that bureaucracies use when they mean demand that I keep this school's new British transfer under close observation, restrict his correspondence, and report any irregularity in his conduct directly to the office of the undersecretary who signed it. Her eyes did not leave Harry's. They have also informed me as a courtesy that they intend to send an observer, a liaison the letter calls him. To ensure, it says, that the terms of your treaty transfer are scrupulously honored. He arrives within the fortnight. The cold thing in Harry's chest went very still and very sharp. They had not finished with him. Of course they had not. A man who had spent so much building a trap did not simply walk away once the prey was 3,000 miles gone. He sent a watcher to make certain the prey stayed buried to manufacture the next irregularity if the boy showed any sign of climbing out. Ashbury had reached across an ocean to plant a hand inside Harry's new sanctuary before Harry had finished unpacking. It was, Harry thought, exactly what he himself would have done in Ashbury's place, and he respected it, and he intended to turn it into the man's undoing. "And will you," Harry asked, "observe me, restrict my letters, report my irregularities to the office of the man who framed me?" Weems regarded him for a long moment. Then she picked up the sealed letter, walked to the cold hearth, and laid it on the grate, and with a small economical gesture set it alight, and watched the serpentine key seal blacken and curl and fail. "I run a school for the children that the world finds it more convenient to discard than to understand," Larissa Weems said, watching the letter burn. "I have been doing it for a very long time, and I have learned to recognize the particular weight of a child who has been disposed of by frightened, powerful people. You carry it, Mr. Potter. Miss Adams saw it before I did, which is why she claimed you, because whatever else she has never once in 2 years been wrong about who deserves the protection of being dangerous." She turned from the fire. "I do not work for the office that signed that letter. I work for the outcasts. You're one of mine now the moment you crossed my gate, and Nevermore does not surrender its own to the people who threw them away. I will not observe you, I will not restrict your owls, and when the liaison arrives I will receive him with every courtesy and tell him absolutely nothing, and you will conduct whatever it is the two of you are so transparently planning with the discretion to keep it off my desk, so that I may continue with a clear conscience to know nothing at all." A pause. "Are we understood?" "We're understood," Harry said, and meant it, and added, because she had earned it, "Thank you. Don't thank me. Thanking me implies I've done you a favor, and I've merely done my job." She returned to the window in her domain of pines. "Go to dinner, both of you, and Mr. Potter, whatever you're building, build it well. The people who do this sort of thing always believe the dangerous part is over once they've shipped the inconvenient child far enough away." Her composed reflection studied them in the dark glass. "It is one of the few genuine pleasures left to a woman in my position to watch them learn otherwise. Don't disappoint me." Chapter 3 and Chapter 4, two outcasts. They built the war room in a disused belfry above the East Tower, and within a week the bell chamber had become the single most organized space in the school. Harry ran it the way he ran everything now, which was as a problem with edges. One wall became a map of the conspiracy, names in his small, precise hand, lines of red thread between them, gaps where the proof was missing marked with a question mark he refused to fill until he had earned it. Selwyn Vane in the center, the hand that built the trap. Corvin Ashbury above him, the hand that paid. Quentin Ashbury to the side, the staged victim. Ron Weasley below, the bought witness. And at the top, alone in a box drawn heavier than the rest, the name he would not yet let himself look at directly, A.D. the hand that let the trap close. "It's a good wall," Wednesday said the first evening, studying it with the proprietary approval of a connoisseur. "Most people decorate their obsessions with feeling. Yours is clean. You've drawn the man who broke your heart in the same ink as the man who forged your wand, and you've drawn him smaller because his crime is smaller even though it hurt more. That's discipline. I'd find it attractive if I were the sort of person who found things attractive, which I'm not, so disregard the observation." "Noted and disregarded," Harry said, and went on tying thread. The warband took shape around the wall, and Harry learned over those first days exactly what each of them was for. Thing was reconnaissance and burglary. The severed hand could go where no person could, under doors, through the gaps in old stone, along the gutters, and into the pipes of a building that had a great many of both. He could pick any lock in the school within a minute and most outside it within 5, and he could carry a message folded small in his grip across distances that would have exhausted an owl, and he kept what he saw to himself until Wednesday asked, at which point he reported in the flickering finger language that she translated, and Harry was slowly learning to read. Within 3 days Thing had mapped the staff wing, the records office, and the route the school's mail took from the owlery to the sorting room, where Harry suspected the promised liaison would try to intercept his correspondence the moment he arrived. Enid was the network. She knew everyone, and everyone told her things, and she retained all of it under a surface of bright chatter that made people forget she was retaining anything. She came back from a single lunch with the entire social topology of the school, who owed whom, who feared whom, which staff member was sleeping badly and which was drinking, who had transferred out in October, and why the administration considered it closed. "People think because I'm friendly I'm not paying attention," she told Harry cheerfully, sorting a fistful of gossip into useful and useless with a speed that startled him. "It's the best cover there is. Wednesday's cover is that she's terrifying, so people clam up. Mine is that I'm a golden retriever, so people just talk. You should see what a golden retriever can find out. Wednesday was the edge. She did the things the rest of them could not, the lock that needed a body, the threat that needed a face, the precise application of fear to a person who knew something and didn't want to say it. She moved through the school like weather, and the school had long ago learned to give her room, and she used the room to be everywhere and accountable to no one. She also, Harry discovered, possessed an encyclopedic and genuinely alarming knowledge of poisons, untraceable injuries, and the legal definitions of culpability across 4 jurisdictions, the last of which she had memorized for recreation. And Harry was the method. He took what the others brought him and built it into a structure, a sequence of proofs, each one supporting the next, the whole thing engineered so that when it was complete it would stand up not in his own certainty, but in a chamber under oath against the best lawyers a frightened undersecretary could buy. He had learned the hard way that being right was worthless. He intended this time to be right in a way that could not be dismissed, ignored, sealed, or shipped 3,000 miles out of sight. "You're not building a case," Wednesday observed on the 4th night watching him work. "You're building a weapon. A case persuades. This is designed to detonate." "A case persuades people who want to be persuaded," Harry said, not looking up from the thread. "The people I'm aiming at don't want to be persuaded. They want me gone and forgotten and their version permanent. You can't persuade a man out of a position he's being paid to hold. You can only make holding it more expensive than abandoning it. So yes. A weapon, I'm going to make my innocence cost them more than my guilt is worth, and then they'll discover they believe me after all." He tied off a length of red thread between Vane and a new card that read Patrol Order, Forged Serpent Seal. "Persuasion is for friends. These people aren't my friends. They're a market, and I'm going to move the price." The intelligence came in over the following 2 weeks, owl by owl, in Luna's looping hand, and each letter moved a piece on the wall. The book's title broke first. Luna had found her dishonest way. She had registered herself as a character witness, been denied access to the sealed record, and then simply befriended the junior clerk who filed the denials, who turned out to be lonely and to like being listened to, which was a skill Luna possessed in abundance and deployed without mercy. The book taken from Harry's trunk was a third-rate grimoire called Humors and Their Corruption, and its flourish and blots inventory charm logged a single purchase 11 months prior, by a customer who had paid in cash but signed the shop's loan register for a different volume the same afternoon, and the signature on the loan register was a looping, cramped hand that Luna had traced and copied, and that matched when Harry laid it against the forged patrol order. In the distinctive backward hook of its lowercase G, Selwyn Vane had bought the book that was planted in Harry's trunk. 11 months before the crime, which meant the trap had been 11 months in the planning, which meant it had been planned before Vane was ever seconded to Hogwarts, which meant the secondment itself was part of the machine and not a coincidence of it. 11 months, Harry said, pinning the new card. They started building this before he ever set foot in the school. The whole appointment was manufactured. Someone in the ministry created a need for a curse-tracing specialist, filled the need with their own man, and then 3 weeks after he arrived, a curse happened that only he was qualified to investigate. He stepped back from the wall. That's not a crime of opportunity, that's a year-long operation. And year-long operations cost money and require a sponsor with reach inside the ministry's appointments office, which narrows the field of who paid for it to a very short list of people, all of whom sit in the Wisengamot. The motive broke second, and it broke in public in the pages of the Daily Prophet, which Luna posted to him wrapped around a quill she said she'd enchanted to tell the truth even when written by liars, and which Harry suspected she'd simply enchanted to annoy whoever read it. The front page carried a small, dignified, devastating notice. In the matter of the estates and entailed interests of a convicted minor presently resident abroad, the Wisengamot had voted to appoint a temporary administrator to safeguard the said interests against waste and depredation during the period of the minor's incapacity, the appointment to run until the minor's majority or the satisfactory completion of his rehabilitation, whichever the administrating body deemed later. The administrator named was the office of the Undersecretary for Wisengamot Affairs, Corvin Ashbury. "There it is," Harry said softly, and pinned the notice beneath Ashbury's name, and drew the thread that connected the man to the motive with a steadiness that surprised even him. "He framed me to inherit me. The conviction strips my standing. The exile keeps me from contesting it in person. And now, while I'm 3,000 miles away and legally a disgraced child, he's been handed administration of everything my family ever held, the vaults, the seats, the proxies, the Peveril entail behind the Potter name that the Goblins' ledgers track under a title I'm not supposed to know yet. He'll manage it in my interest until I come of age, and by the time I come of age the management will be a fact, and the facts will be a wall, and a wall is much harder to climb than it was to build." He stood back and looked at the completed line, crime, conviction, exile, administration, running clean across the wall from Vane's forged book to Ashbury's public appointment, and felt the cold satisfaction of a hypothesis confirmed in every particular. He's good, he's genuinely good. He built a machine that turns a lie into law, and at every stage it looks like procedure. There's no single moment you can point to and say that's the crime. It's all crime distributed so thin across so many legal acts that no single act is illegal. Then we don't attack the acts, Wednesday said. We attack the thread, pull the one piece that can't be made legal, the forged wand, the forged order, and the whole thing reveals what it is. A machine for laundering a lie. Once the room can see the machine, they can't unsee it. She tilted her head. How long until the administration becomes permanent? The notice says it runs until my majority or my rehabilitation, whichever the administrating body deems later. Harry's mouth twisted. The administrating body is Ashbury. He gets to decide when I'm rehabilitated. So the answer is, it becomes permanent whenever he wants it to, and never ends until he chooses, and he'll never choose, because the moment it ends he has to give everything back and explain where it went. He looked at her. There's a Wisengamot session in 5 weeks where he'll move to convert the temporary administration to a standing trusteeship. That's the clock. If that motion passes, the theft stops being temporary and starts being permanent, and unwinding it goes from hard to nearly impossible. 5 weeks. That's how long we have to build the weapon and find a way to detonate it in that chamber. 5 weeks. Wednesday considered it with the flat appetite she brought to anything difficult. It's not enough time. Which is good. I do my best work against a clock. Sentiment can't survive the pace. She crossed to the wall and laid one pale finger on the heavy box at the top, the one marked AD, and this one. The headmaster, he's not in the machine. Where does he go in 5 weeks? Harry looked at the box for a long moment. He goes last, he said. After, when it's done and proven and there's nothing left for him to weigh me against. I told you I don't confront him as a wrong child. I confront him as the verdict, or I don't confront him at all. He turned from the wall. Let's build the weapon. The old man can wait. He's good at waiting. He waited 5 years to teach me what I was worth to him. He can wait 5 weeks to learn what I'm worth without him. They trained because Harry insisted on it, and Wednesday allowed it because she discovered, to her flat surprise, that she enjoyed losing to him almost as much as winning, which had never happened to her before. The old fencing hall in the school's lower level was empty after dark, and they took it, and there Harry learned exactly how dangerous the girl who had claimed him actually was, and she learned the same of him, and the learning was, for both of them, the closest thing either had to trust. She was faster than anyone he had ever crossed wands with, faster than Death Eaters, faster than the things in the graveyard, faster in a way that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with a body trained from childhood by a family that considered mortal danger a wholesome pastime. The first night she put the button tip of a foil against his throat 4 times before he landed a single counter, and she did it without expression, narrating his errors in the flat contralto as she made them. You telegraph with your shoulder, you did it then and then. You're used to enemies who announce themselves, wands raised, threats spoken, the courtesy of a duel. I don't announce, stop waiting for the announcement. Most of my enemies do announce, Harry said, picking himself up. Then most of your enemies are amateurs and you survived them, and survival made you lazy. She reset her guard. The ones who matter don't raise their wands, they forge them and walk away. You know this, you met one. Fight like you remember meeting him. So Harry stopped waiting for the announcement, and the 4th night he disarmed her, not with skill, he was honest enough to know it, but with magic she hadn't accounted for, a wordless banishing charm he'd cast off the back foot in the half-second her weight committed to a lunge. The foil flew. Wednesday stood with her empty hand still extended and looked at the place the weapon had been, and then at him, and something moved in the black eyes that he had not seen there before. Cheated, she said. I used every tool I had against a faster opponent. You told me to fight like I remembered meeting Vane. Vane cheated. I'm learning. He lowered his wand. You're still better. You'll be better tomorrow. But you'll never put a blade to my throat 4 times in a row again, because now you know I'll do something you can't predict, and the not knowing slows you down a quarter second, and a quarter second is everything. He almost smiled. That's the whole game, isn't it? Make them uncertain. Taught me that in the courtyard. I'm just giving it back. Wednesday retrieved her foil. She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke her flat voice had something in it he couldn't name. My family has a saying, she said. We don't say it often because we don't often mean it. Sting first, sting last, sting hardest. She set her guard again, but she did not lunge. She looked at him over the line of the blade. I have crossed swords with a great many people, Harry Potter. They fall into 2 kinds. The kind I frighten and the kind who fright me back and resent me for it. You're a 3rd kind. You fright me back and you're pleased about it. You like that I'm dangerous. You're not threatened by it and you're not trying to tame it. You just want it pointed in the same direction as yours. The black eyes held his across the steel. Do you know how rare that is? In my entire life, exactly 1 person has ever looked at the most dangerous thing about me and said, good, I can use that, stand beside me. And he's standing in a fencing hall at midnight letting me put a sword to his throat so we both get better at the thing we're going to do to the people who hurt him. Her chin lifted a fraction. I find I would set the world on fire before I let anyone take you the way they took everything else from you. I'm telling you because you should have the data. Don't make it sentimental. It's not sentiment. It's the most coldly considered decision I've ever made. Was Harry understood, the warmest thing she was capable of saying, precisely because she had stripped every warm word out of it and left only the iron, and the iron was real in a way that warmth had never been for him, and he received it the way it was given, which was as a fact about the structure of the world. Same, he said, just that. She despised more. Good. She lunged and put the foil against his throat, and the black eyes glinted. You telegraphed again. Sentiment makes you slow. Note it. But she was, he saw, as close to pleased as her face came, and they fought for another hour, and neither of them mentioned it again, and neither of them needed to. The liaison arrived on the 11th day, and his name was Gideon Mowbray, and Harry disliked him on sight in the specific way you dislike a competent instrument of a bad cause. He was nothing like Vane. Vane had been an artist. Mowbray was a tool, broad, neat, hard-faced, with the flat, watchful eyes of a man who had spent his career making inconvenient people more convenient, and had stopped, long ago, asking why. He arrived in a ministry traveling cloak with a Confederation liaison's badge and a smile that did not reach above his cheekbones, and Weems received him with every courtesy and told him absolutely nothing, exactly as she had promised, and installed him in a guest room in the gatehouse from which he could watch the comings and goings of the school, and he plainly believed of Harry in particular. He's good at watching, Enid reported 3 days into Mowbray's residence, sliding onto the belfry's bench with a fistful of intelligence. He's already mapped your schedule. He knows you train at night. He's been asking the gatehouse staff about your owls, when they come, where they go, who sends them. And yesterday he was in the village asking the postmistress whether any mail for the school passes through her office without going up to the owlery. She wrinkled her nose. He's building something. I've seen this before. My uncle got railroaded out of his pack the same way. First they send a watcher, then the watcher finds something, then it turns out the watcher brought the something with him. He's going to plant, Harry said. He felt no alarm, only the cold clarity of a man watching an opponent make the move he'd been waiting for. Of course he is. That's why Ashbury sent him. I'm 3,000 miles away and convicted and supposedly buried, but I'm also a loose end, because the administration only stays clean if I stay quiet. If I start making noise, writing letters, gathering proof, showing any sign of climbing out of the hole, then Ashbury needs a reason to tighten the leash. A fresh irregularity. A new violation of my treaty terms that justifies revoking the suspension and snapping my wand after all, or pulling me back to a cell. Mowbray's here to manufacture one the moment I become inconvenient. He looked at Wednesday. Which means the most dangerous thing we can do is exactly what we're doing. Every owl from Luna is a risk. He's watching the mail. Then we feed the mail to him, Wednesday said. Harry looked at her. The plan assembled itself between them without another word passing. He saw her see it, saw her see him see it. The synchrony again. Two minds arriving at the same cold place on the same heartbeat. We let him intercept a letter, Harry said slowly. A real-looking one, full of nothing, or worse than nothing, full of a lie we want him to carry back to London. We learn what he does with it, who he reports to, how fast, by what route. He thinks he's surveilling us. He's actually a sensor we've planted inside Ashbury's operation. Every move he makes tells us something about the man pulling his string. And when he plants his contraband, Wednesday added, we'll already know it's coming because we'll have watched him receive it or make it. Thing can shadow him, he'll never know. Thing has shadowed clever men than a ministry leg breaker. Her mouth did the not smile. He came here to build a trap inside my school. I'm going to let him build it and document every brick, and then I'm going to hand the whole thing back to him at the moment of maximum cost. It's a much better use of him than killing him, which was my first instinct and which I've nobly set aside. Don't kill the liaison, Harry agreed. We need him reporting to London. A dead liaison just brings a more careful one. I set it aside. I didn't say it was easy. Note my restraint. It took 9 days to turn Gideon Mowbray from a watcher into an instrument, and Harry would remember it as the period in which he learned fully what he and Wednesday were together. Things shadowed the man everywhere, into the village, into the gatehouse, into the small hours when he thought himself unobserved. They watched him receive a package from London by an owl that came in over the water at night, and Thing, who could go where no person could, was waiting in the gatehouse pipes when Mowbray opened it and reported what it held. A vial of dark, slow liquid that Harry recognized from the black cloth in the great hall, and a length of greasy gray cord, the same materials as the original frame. Mowbray had been sent the components to plant a second curse kit in Harry's possession, to manufacture the irregularity that would justify dragging him home. They let him hold it. They let him choose his moment. And on the day he slipped into the East Tower to hide the kit in Harry's room, Thing had picked the lock open for him an hour before, so the man would find his task suspiciously easy and suspect nothing. Wednesday was waiting in the stairwell with a camera Enid had borrowed from the yearbook club, and Harry was waiting with Weems, whom he had brought into precisely as much of the truth as she needed and no more. And Gideon Mowbray walked out of Harry Potter's room with empty hands and walked directly into the principal of Nevermore Academy, a photograph of his crime already developing in a girl's pocket, and the components of the frame still warm from where he'd hidden them under the loose hearthstone that Thing had loosened for exactly this purpose. Mr. Mowbray, Larissa Weems said, with terrible courtesy. I wonder if you'd care to explain to me why a Confederation liaison has just planted Class C dark materials in the room of a student under my protection. I'd advise you to consider your answer carefully. The Confederation takes a dim view of its observers committing on foreign soil the exact crimes they were sent to observe. Mowbray was good. Harry gave him that. The flat, watchful eyes did the arithmetic in under a second, the photograph, the witnesses, the materials with his prints now on them. The school principal who was supposed to be his ally and was very plainly not, and arrived at the only conclusion available, which was that the trap he'd been sent to build had been built around him instead, by a transfer student he'd been told was a beaten, isolated, frightened boy. You can't prove he began. We can prove all of it, Harry said, stepping out of the stairwell. He kept his voice level and almost kind because the kindness he had learned was worse. The photograph, the materials with your hands on them, the owl that brought them, which the postmistress in the village will confirm she saw because Miss Sinclair has spent 9 days making friends with her. And the letter you intercepted last week, the one full of nothing, which you copied and sent to London, which proves you're running unauthorized surveillance on a treaty-protected minor and reporting to a domestic office that has no Confederation jurisdiction over me at all. He let that land. You're not the hunter here, Mr. Mowbray. You haven't been the hunter since the day you arrived. You've been a censor and you've been very informative, and now you're a liability to me, but much more to the man who sent you, because everything you've done on this mountain is a crime that traces directly back to the office of Corvin Ashbury. You have exactly one asset left in the world, and it's not the curse kit and it's not your badge, it's what you know. And I'm offering to buy it before London works out that you've been compromised and decides a dead liaison is cheaper than a captured one. The flat eyes flickered. It was the first human thing Mowbray had done. You think Ashbury wouldn't have a man like you killed the moment you became a risk, Harry went on, conversational. You've worked for him long enough to know exactly what he does with instruments that break. He framed a 16-year-old to steal an inheritance. You're a great deal more disposable than I was, and I was disposable enough to ship across an ocean. So here's the offer. Tell me how the priming was done, the wand forgery, the technical record of it, who keeps it and where. Tell me the chain that connects Vane to Ashbury in writing. And in exchange, you walk off this mountain alive with a head start before either the Confederation or your employer decides what you've become. He stepped closer. I'm not threatening you, Mr. Mowbray. I don't have to. Your own side is the threat. I'm the exit. The gatehouse was very quiet. Outside, a crow said something to the dark. And Gideon Mowbray, hard-faced instrument of a bad cause, looked at the cold boy who had turned his trap inside out and the girl with a camera and the principal who had burned his master's letter, and made the only calculation a survivor makes and started in a low, flat voice to talk. It took an hour. When it was done, they had a name, not veins. They had veins, but the name behind the name, the one that turned the wand forgery from a thing they believed into a thing they could prove. The priming of Harry's wand had not been done by Vane alone. It required a specialist instrument, a charm engine the Department of Mysteries kept in a sealed registry, and the engine left a signature, and the signature was logged, and the log named the technician who had operated the engine on the night Harry's wand was forged. A real person, a record. A thread that ran from a sealed ministry registry straight into the holly wand still sitting in Harry's pocket. When Mowbray had gone, escorted to the gate by Weems, who watched him down the mountain road with the expression of a woman disposing of something unpleasant she'd found in a drawer, Wednesday Addams stood in the gatehouse and looked at the new name written in Harry's hand, and the black eyes were very bright. We have a name, she said, and the name has a record, and the record has a registry, and the registry is a room with a lock, and there is no lock that thing cannot open, and no room that I cannot enter. Her mouth did the not smile, slow and terrible. Names lead to records, records lead to rooms, and rooms, Harry, lead to throats. She turned to him. We're past investigation now. We know who, we know how, we know why. All that's left is to gather the proof in our hands and decide very precisely how each of them is going to learn what they threw away. The black eyes held his. I've been waiting my whole life for a worthy reason to be exactly as dangerous as I am. You've given me one. I won't wait. Let's go to London. We can't go to London, Harry said. That's the problem I've been turning over for 2 weeks, and it's the one piece of this that doesn't have an easy answer. They had returned to the belfry, the 4 of them in the hand, and Harry stood before the wall with its red threads all running now to a single conclusion, and he laid out the trap inside the trap, the elegant little prison that Ashbury had built around the entire endeavor. The suspension of my wand forfeiture is conditional, he said. I keep my magic as long as I stay out of British jurisdiction. The moment I set foot on British soil before my majority, the condition is void and the forfeiture is immediate. They snap my wand on the spot, no hearing, no appeal, it's automatic. Ashbury wrote it that way on purpose. He didn't just exile me. He built the exile so that the one thing I'd need to do to fight him, appear in the Weisengamot in person with my proof, is the one thing that destroys me the instant I try it. He tapped the wall. It's the cleverest part of the whole machine. He left me my wand and my voice and my proof, and then he made it so that using any of them in the only room that matters cost me all three. He's not afraid of me having evidence. He's counting on me never being able to present it. Then send it, Enid said. Mail the proof to someone in London, the professor with the mirror. Let her present it. That's his second layer. Harry shook his head. Evidence presented by a third party about an absent convicted minor gets read into the record and then dismissed as the agitation of a discredited boy's sympathizers. McGonagall could stand up with every document we have, and Ashbury would thank her for her concern and move that the matter be referred to committee, and the committee is him, and it would die there. Documents don't detonate. Wednesday was right about that, but I was wrong about how they detonate. They don't detonate when they're read. They detonate when the man they accuse has to answer them, in real time, in front of witnesses, with no time to prepare a story. The proof is only a weapon if I'm in the room to fire it, and I can't be in the room. He stood back. So that's the problem. The whole thing comes down to one question, and I've spent 2 weeks on it. How does a boy who cannot enter Britain force a reckoning inside the highest court in Britain? The belfry was quiet. Thing drummed its fingers thoughtfully on the bench. You're asking the wrong question, Wednesday said. Harry turned. You've accepted his frame. You're trying to solve the puzzle he built, which means you're playing on the board he drew, which is the one mistake you keep warning the rest of us against. She rose and came to the wall and put her finger on the line that read Exile, Confederation Treaty. He exiled you under a treaty. The British ministry didn't have the authority to ship a minor across an ocean on its own. It borrowed the authority of the International Confederation of Wizards, because the Confederation's Education Convention was the only legal instrument that let them do it without snapping your wand and creating a martyr. But a borrowed authority cuts both ways. Her black eyes found his. You're not just a British convict anymore, Harry. You're a Confederation transfer. You're a minor placed under the protection of an international body in a foreign school by a treaty, which means the British ministry isn't the only court with jurisdiction over what was done to you. It's not even the highest one. Harry went very still. He saw it open in front of him, the way the whole machine had opened in the Great Hall when they declined to snap his wand, and he understood that he had been, for 2 weeks, exactly as trapped as Ashbury intended, because he had been thinking like a British wizard, and the answer had never been British at all. The Confederation has standing, he said slowly. If I petition the Confederation, not the British ministry, the Confederation, as a treaty-protected minor alleging that the conviction underlying my transfer was procured by fraud, then the proceeding isn't a British one. It's an international one, and an international proceeding doesn't have to happen on British soil. It happens on neutral ground or by the Confederation's own remote convocation, and a treaty-protected minor has the right to appear and be heard in his own defense regardless of any domestic condition a member state has placed on him, because a member state cannot use a borrowed treaty to strip the very protections the treaty exists to provide. He was moving now, pacing, the plan firing in the cold, clear space. Ashbury borrowed the Confederation's authority to exile me. The instant he did that, he put me under the Confederation's protection. He handed me the one shield his own clever forfeiture clause can't touch, because the forfeiture clause is British, and the appearance right is international, and international supersedes domestic when the domestic act is the thing being challenged. He stopped, he looked at her. He outthought everyone in that courtroom. He outthought me for 2 weeks. And the one move he didn't see is that the treaty he used as a leash is also a door, and he handed me the key when he signed the transfer. Names lead to records, Wednesday said. Records lead to rooms, and the right room, it turns out, is one he can't keep you out of because he's the one who put you in the building. Her mouth did the not smile. I told you he'd made an error in the disposal of you. This is the error. He should have snapped your wand and made a martyr. Instead, he made you a ward of the world. The world is a much larger enemy than a boy, and he's about to discover he summoned it himself. 5 weeks, Harry said. His trusteeship motion is in 5 weeks. If I file a Confederation petition for fraudulent conviction before that motion is heard, the trusteeship is stayed automatically. You can't convert the administration of a minor's estate to a permanent trust while there's a live international challenge to the conviction the administration rests on. The petition freezes the clock, and it forces a hearing where I appear with the proof, and Ashbury has to answer it not by fluke projection from a safe distance, but in a convocation where the Confederation's own members are watching, the same members whose treaty he abused to do this. He let out a breath. We don't go to London, we make London come to us. We drag the whole thing onto neutral ground where his domestic machine has no power, and we make him stand in a room he can't control and answer questions he can't predict in front of an audience he can't buy. He looked around the belfry at his strange, small warband. That's the detonation. That's how a boy who can't enter Britain forces a reckoning inside the highest court there is. He doesn't enter Britain, he goes over its head. The last piece arrived 4 days later, and it arrived in a letter that was not from Luna. It was from Ron. Harry knew the handwriting before he broke the seal, the cramped, blotchy scrawl of a boy who had never once in 6 years willingly written a letter, and he stood for a moment in the belfry with the unopened parchment in his hand and felt the cold thing in his chest do something complicated. Because of all the hands on the wall, this was the only one that had ever shaken his. He opened it. He read it standing up. Harry, it said, I don't know if y'all even read this. I don't know if I'd read it if I were you. Luna gave me the address. She didn't say much. She just looked at me the way she does, like she can see the inside of your head, and she said I should write what was true and not what was easy, so I'm trying to. I've been thinking about that night, the corridor, what I said at the hearing. I keep going over it. The thing is, Harry, what I said was true. You did say that thing to Quentin, choke on it, I heard you. But the way they had me say it, the order they put the questions in, the bloke from the ministry who walked me through it 3 times before the hearing, so I'd remember it clearly. I've started to think the true thing I said wasn't the same as the thing they built out of it. They knew exactly which words they wanted. They asked me about the corridor before I'd told anyone I'd been in the corridor. How did they know to ask? And Harry, they changed my patrol that week. I didn't think anything of it at the time. McGonagall does the routes, but the new one came down with a different signature, and I just walked where the paper said. I was meant to be there. I keep thinking that. Somebody put me in that corridor so I'd find Quentin and run into you, and I did exactly what they wanted, and I told myself it was because I was angry at you, and I was so angry this year. You pulled away, and I let myself believe the worst, because believing the worst was easier than admitting I missed you, but angry isn't the same as right, and I think I was angry on purpose. I think someone wanted me angry. I think I was a tool, Harry, and I think you knew it before I did, because you looked at me in that hall like you were sorry for me, and I've never been able to forget it. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I did the thing. Whatever they built it out of, I handed them the bricks. But if there's a way to make it right, if you're doing what I think you're doing, what Luna won't say you're doing, then I'll testify. The real version, how they coached me, how my patrol got changed, who asked me what and when. It probably damns me too. I don't care. I'd rather be the idiot who got used and admitted it than the coward who got used and kept quiet to save his own skin. Tell me what you need. I owe you the truth at least. I'm sorry I gave them everything but it. Harry read it twice. Then he set it down on the belfry bench and stood looking out at the black pines and was quiet for a long time. Well, Wednesday said behind him. She had read it over his shoulder because she had no concept of privacy, and he had stopped expecting her to. He's weak, he betrayed you, and now he's frightened and guilty, and he's offering to testify because confessing will make him feel better. You shouldn't trust the feeling. People who help you to relieve their own guilt abandon you the moment the guilt is paid down. She tilted her head. But a coached witness who recants is the single most destructive thing you can put in front of a tribunal. His weakness damned you. His weakness turned damns the men who used it. I'd use him. I just wouldn't believe him. A pause. What will you do? Harry picked the letter back up. He thought about a boy who had pulled a lever because someone told him it rang a bell and had heard the trapdoor open and had spent 3 months living with the sound. He didn't lie, Harry said. Not then, not now. He said something true and let them build a lie on it, and that's the thing he has to live with, and he knows it, and he wrote it down with his own hand where it can be used against him. He folded the letter. You're right that I shouldn't trust the feeling, but I don't need to trust him. I need his testimony, and his testimony is true, and the truth doesn't care whether his motives are clean. He was a tool. They aimed him at me. I'm going to aim him back. He looked at Wednesday, and something in his face had hardened past the place where forgiveness lived and into the colder, clearer country beyond it. He asked what I need. I'm going to tell him. And then every hand on that wall is going to be answerable in a room they can't escape on a day they didn't choose. He crossed to the wall, took up his quill, and beneath Ron Weasley's name he wrote a single word, and the word was not enemy and it was not forgiven. The word was witness. Now, Harry said, we have everything. The how, the why, the names, the records, the room, and the one voice from the inside that turns their own weapon against them. He capped the ink. 5 weeks. Let's build the detonation, and then let's go and watch them learn what they threw away. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5. Who betrayed him? There was one thing the warband needed that none of them could reach from a belfry in Vermont, and so Wednesday Addams went to London alone because she was the only one of them who could. You can't enter Britain, she said, settling the matter before Harry could argue it. Luna can move inside the school but not inside the ministry. Enid is a werewolf 3,000 miles from her pack and would be conspicuous in a country that registers us. Thing can open the lock, but he can't make the decisions a body has to make on the other side of it. I can. I'm a foreign national with no record in your jurisdiction, no treaty leash, and a face nobody in your ministry has cause to know. I can walk into London as a tourist and walk out with the one piece of proof that turns we believe into here it is. She was already packing a small black case, the sharpened foil, a roll of instruments Harry chose not to examine. I'll take thing. You'll direct from here through the mirror. I dislike taking orders, so I'll reframe them as suggestions I happen to agree with, and we'll both pretend that's the arrangement. Harry did not like it. He examined why he did not like it, with the cold honesty she demanded of him, and found that the reason was not tactical. Tactically, it was the correct plan, the only plan, but something else, something that had grown in the belfry over 5 weeks of red thread and midnight fencing, and which he was not yet ready to name even to himself. If it goes wrong, he said, I can't come for you. I cross that border and I lose my wand and my standing and the whole case collapses. If you're caught in London, you're alone and I have to stay here and let you be alone. I need you to understand that before you go. I'm not built to let people walk into danger I can't follow them into. I've been doing it my whole life and I've hated every time. Something flickered across the white face. Now you understand the claim, Wednesday said. It runs in both directions. You hate sending me where you can't follow. I'd rather be dropped in the lake than watch you snap your own wand trying to. So neither of us does the stupid thing. I go because I'm the one who can. You stay because you're the one who must, and we both find it intolerable, which is the proof that it's real. She closed the case. I'll come back. I always come back. The boy in October will tell you I'm very difficult to be rid of. A pause. He won't actually, but he'd want to. She was gone within the hour, and Harry directed the operation from the war room through McGonagall's brass mirror, and he learned, over the 4 days that followed, what it was to run a war at one remove, and what it was to trust someone with his life from across an ocean. She moved through London like a blade through water. The first piece was the technician, the name Mowbray had given them, a Department of Mysteries charm operator called Edric Pike, who had run the engine that wrote the false memory into Harry's wand, and who had, like all of Ashbury's instruments, been chosen for his competence and abandoned to his fear. Wednesday found him in a bottle in a Nocturne Alley cellar, a small grey man drinking himself toward the version of the night he could live with, and she sat down across from him and did not threaten him, because she had learned from Harry that the most frightening thing you could do to a guilty man was to already know. You operated the mnemonic engine on the 3rd of October, she told him in the flat contralto, laying a copy of the registry requisition on the sticky table. Thing had lifted it from the sealed log 2 nights before, through a gap in the registry wall no person could have fit through, and Wednesday had it now as a photograph that did not technically exist. You wrote a forged casting memory into a holly wand belonging to a 16-year-old. The engine logs its operators. Your name is on the night the wand was forged, and the wand's forgery carries your signature the way a forged painting carries the forger's brushstroke, and there is a boy across an ocean who has the wand, and the requisition, and now your face. She let it sit. Mr. Ashbury told you it would never be looked at. Mr. Ashbury tells everyone that. He told Gideon Mowbray the same thing, and Gideon Mowbray is currently running for a boarder with everything he knows, because the alternative was waiting for Ashbury to decide he'd become inconvenient. You're more inconvenient than Mowbray, Mr. Pike. You're the technical proof. You're the one piece that can't be explained away as a discredited boy's bitterness. Mr. Ashbury cannot afford for you to be found. I found you in an afternoon. She tilted her head, so. You can be the man who recants, protected on the record, on the right side of the thing when it breaks, or you can be the loose end Mr. Ashbury cleans up the week before the hearing. I'm offering you the only future in which you're alive at Christmas. I'd take it. I'm rarely generous, and the offer expires when I finish this sentence. Edric Pike told her everything and signed an affidavit, and Thing notarized it with a wax seal stolen from a solicitor's office, and Wednesday sent the photograph of it through the mirror that night, and Harry pinned the image to the wall under Vane's name and felt the machine become, for the first time, provable, not believed, not deduced, but documented in the hand of the man who had built the lie into the wood. The second piece was the healer's record, and it came easier, because the healer who had treated Quentin Ashbury had a conscience and a fear of perjury in roughly equal measure. Quentin had been admitted with a genuine but minor humor imbalance, uncomfortable, alarming to look at, entirely survivable, the kind of thing a competent healer reversed in a week. The near-fatal bile curse had been a story told over a real but trivial illness, the gray skin and the black fluid a cosmetic horror dressed up as a death sentence for the benefit of a courtroom. The boy had been walking within 9 days, the record said so. The record had been sealed alongside the rest, and Thing brought it out through the same gap in the same wall, and now the wall in the belfry held the proof that the victim had never been dying and the proof that the wand had never cast a curse, and between them they unmade the entire factual basis of Harry's conviction. He was in on it, Harry said, looking at the healer's record. Quentin, he let himself be made sick. You don't lie still under a humor imbalance for the cameras unless you know it's theater and you know you'll walk away. He's not a victim, he's a performer, the uncle's nephew playing dead to frame the boy whose inheritance the uncle wanted. He added Quentin's name to the line of the guilty where it belonged. That's the whole cast now. Vane built it, Pike forged the wand, Quentin played the corpse, Ron carried the false witness without knowing he was carrying it, Mowbray came to keep it buried. And Ashbury paid for all of it to steal a dead family's estate from the last living member of it, who happened to be a child no one would fight for. He stepped back from the wall, and the whole conspiracy stood revealed on it, every thread tied, every gap filled, every question mark replaced at last with a name. 5 weeks ago I had nothing but a certainty no court would hear. Now I have a documented machine with a man's signature on every gear. We did it. We actually did it. We did the easy part, Wednesday's voice said, flat and tinny, from the brass mirror propped against the wall. She was in a rented room in Diagon Alley with Thing perched on the headboard and a city full of enemies outside the window, and she did not sound remotely concerned about any of it. We proving who is for accountants. Now comes the part that's actually difficult, which is making them answer for it in a way they can feel. Paper convicts. Paper doesn't make a man understand what he did. I have some thoughts about the part where they understand. I've been having them for 5 weeks. They're not legal thoughts. A pause. But before any of that, you've been avoiding the wall's top box again. I can see you not looking at it through the mirror. You found everyone's hand, Harry. You proved every one of them, except the one at the top. When are you going to use the thing in your pocket and talk to the old man? Harry's eyes went against his will to the heavy box at the top of the wall, a.d. the hand that let the trap close. Tonight, he said. I'll do it tonight. He waited until the belfry was empty and the school was asleep, and then he took out the brass two-way mirror and breathed on it and said the name of the woman who held its mate, and Minerva McGonagall's face swam up out of the clouded glass, sharp and tired, in the lamplight of her office 3,000 miles and 5 hours away. Potter. Relief and alarm fought across her features. You're well, you've not done anything. I'm well, Professor. I've done a great deal and all of it careful. He kept it brief. The mirror was a door and he did not waste it. I need you to do something, and I need you to decide quickly whether you can. I need to speak to the headmaster tonight through this mirror. I won't ask you to carry a message, and I won't ask you to take a side. I'm asking you to put the glass in front of his face and let him choose whether to look into it. That's all. After that, it's between him and me. McGonagall was quiet for a long moment, and Harry watched her run the cost of it, what it would mean to walk into Albus Dumbledore's office at midnight and hold up a mirror to a boy he had abandoned. Then her mouth thinned into the line he knew, the line that meant she had decided to do the right thing and damn the consequences, and she rose without a word and carried the mirror through dark corridors he had walked 1,000 times, and Harry watched the moving stones of Hogwarts slide past the glass and felt nothing he had expected to feel, which was its own kind of answer. The gargoyle, the spiral stair. The round office with its whirring silver instruments and its sleeping portraits and its perch where a phoenix was not, that night, sitting. And then the mirror tilted up, and McGonagall's voice said, very low, Albus, there is someone who wishes to speak with you, and Harry Potter looked, for the first time since the Great Hall, into the face of the man who had raised him to be a weapon and spent him like one. Dumbledore had aged. 5 weeks had put years on him, or the years had been there all along, and Harry had never let himself see them. The long face was gaunt above the white beard, and the blue eyes behind the half-moon spectacles when they found Harry's in the glass, filled with a grief so immediate and so genuine that for one treacherous instant the old pull reasserted itself, the lifelong wanting of this man's approval, the child's hunger that no amount of cold clarity had entirely killed. Harry let the instant pass. He had not called to be a child. Harry, Dumbledore breathed, oh, my dear boy, I had hoped. I did not know if you were safe. Minerva would tell me nothing, and I did not press her because I had no right to. You look, the old voice faltered. You look well, you look strong. I am more glad of it than you can know. I didn't call for you to be glad, Harry said. He kept his voice level, the courtroom voice, the one that was worth more than any shout. I called because I'm about to take apart the people who framed me, and before I do, I wanted to give you something the rest of them won't get. I wanted to give you the chance to look at me and tell me in your own words why you didn't lift a finger, not the speech. You gave me the speech in the hall, forces larger than the room, peace that must be held, the school you couldn't spend. I've thought about that speech for 5 weeks. I'd like the version underneath it. I think I've earned the version underneath. The blue eyes closed for a moment. When they opened, something in them had given way, and what was behind it was older and colder and more honest than the grief. You have earned it, Dumbledore said. You have earned far more than I am able to give you, and that has been the tragedy of you since you were a year old. He folded his hands. Very well, the version underneath. When Quentin Ashbury was found, I knew within a day that you were innocent. I knew it the way you knew it. The evidence was too clean, the timing too convenient, the specialist too conveniently placed. I am not a fool, Harry, whatever else I am. I saw the machine almost as quickly as you did. And you let it run, and I let it run. The old man did not look away, and Harry gave him that much credit, that he made himself say it to Harry's face. Corvin Ashbury is not merely a greedy man after a boy's estate. He is the visible piece of a faction in the Wisengamot that has spent 2 years gathering strength, purebloods and pragmatists and frightened men, the sediment that settles in every government after a war, the ones who decided that the way to prevent another Dark Lord was to ensure that no single wizard ever again grew too powerful or too beloved to control. They feared you, Harry, not as a villain. As a force, a boy who had survived what no one survives, whom the public adored, who answered to no house and no ministry and no master, and who was growing every year into something they could not predict or contain. The frame was Ashbury's instrument, but the will behind it was a coalition, and that coalition holds, at this moment, enough votes to do a very great deal of harm to a very great many people if it is provoked into open war. His voice was steady and terrible. I made a calculation. If I fought for you, if I spent my authority, the order's strength, the school's standing, all of it in open battle to clear one boy, I would have shattered the fragile peace that is the only thing standing between this country and a second war, and I would very likely have lost, because they held the chamber and I held only the truth, and you have learned this term, I think, exactly how little the truth weighs against a held chamber. I would have spent everything and lost you anyway and left the rest defenseless. So I did the unforgivable arithmetic. I let them take you intact, alive, with your wand and your wits, to a place beyond their reach, and I told myself that of all the people I have ever had to sacrifice, you were the one most likely to survive the sacrifice and come back, as you have, as you are about to. The office was silent. 3,000 miles away, in a belfry full of red thread, Harry Potter looked at the old man in the glass and felt the wound he had been carrying for 5 weeks finally show him its exact shape. "You're telling me you spent me on purpose," Harry said, "because I was the strongest, because I was the most likely to survive being thrown away. You looked at all the people you could have sacrificed to your peace, and you chose me because I could take it." His voice did not rise. It went, if anything, quieter. "Do you understand what that is? You turn the best thing about me, that I don't break, that I come back, into the reason it was safe to betray me. Everyone else gets protected because they're fragile. I got sacrificed because I'm not. You made my strength the thing that made me expendable." He let the old man see his face fully. "That's the cut, headmaster, not that you abandoned me. People abandon people. It's that you did the sums and decided my being able to bear it was a resource, a thing you could draw on without paying for. You spent my resilience like it was yours to spend. And the worst part, the part I'll carry, is that the arithmetic might even have been right. You might have saved 100 people by feeding me to them. I'll never be able to prove you wrong. You've made it so that hating you for it would make me the selfish one." He breathed out. "That's the most evil thing anyone has ever done to me, and it might also have been the most responsible, and you've left me no way to tell the difference. I think that's the cruelest thing of all." Dumbledore's eyes were wet, and he did not wipe them, and when he spoke his voice had broken into something very old. "Yes," he said simply, "that is what I did. And I have asked myself every night since whether a better man would have found another way, and I do not know the answer, and I will not insult you by pretending I do. I make terrible choices, Harry, and I have made them my whole long life, and I tell myself they are for the greater good, and sometimes they even are, and it has never once made the people I spent feel any less spent." He leaned toward the glass. "I am not going to ask your forgiveness. You are right that it would only burden you further, make you carry my conscience on top of my crime. I will say only this. Whatever you are about to do to Corvin Ashbury and his faction, do it well and do it completely, because if you leave them standing they will do to other children what they did to you, and the next child may not be the one strong enough to come back. Be the thing I was too frightened to be. Win the war I chose not to fight. And know that an old man who failed you utterly is, nonetheless, more proud of what you have made of yourself than he has any right to be." Harry looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not doing it for your pride," he said. "I'm not doing it for the other children, though they'll be safer when it's done. I'm doing it because they threw me away and called it law, and I'm going to make the law admit it was a lie. You don't get to be part of that. You don't get to be redeemed by my war. You get to watch it from that chair, knowing you chose not to fight it, and knowing that the boy you spent didn't need spending, because he found his own people in a school full of monsters who looked at what you threw away and decided it was worth keeping." He lifted the mirror. "Goodbye, headmaster. I won't call again. If you want to know how it ends, read the Confederation record. I'm told it'll be public." "Harry," the old man began. "You taught me something after all," Harry said. "You taught me exactly how much the truth weighs against a held chamber. I'm about to hold the chamber. Thank you for the lesson." He breathed on the glass, and the office faded, and the last thing he saw was Albus Dumbledore's gaunt face in the lamplight, watching him go, and Minerva McGonagall's hand coming to rest on the old man's shoulder, not in comfort, Harry thought, but to hold him there, to make him sit in it. The mirror clouded and went dark. Harry sat alone in the belfry for a long time, with the named wound finally open and at last beginning the slow work of closing. Then he wiped his face once with the back of his hand and put the mirror away and turned back to the wall, because there was a war to win, and grief, he had learned, was a thing you carried while you worked, not instead of it. Corvin Ashbury learned of the petition on a Tuesday in his office above the Wisengamot chamber, and he did not raise his voice, because he had not raised his voice in 30 years and saw no reason to begin over a complication. He read the Confederation filing twice. He was a careful man. He had built a career and lately an estate on being more careful than the people across the table, and he read the petition the way a surgeon reads an unexpected mass on an X-ray, with attention, without panic, already planning the cut. A fraud petition, sponsored out of Geneva, demanding a convocation. The boy had not gone away. The boy had in fact done something rather elegant. He had reached over Ashbury's head to the one authority whose jurisdiction Ashbury's own exile order had handed him, and Ashbury sat for a moment in honest, professional appreciation of the move, the way one master appreciates another, before he began the work of destroying the boy who had made it. He summoned his clerk. "The technician," he said. "Pike, Department of Mysteries, Charm Operations. Find out where he drinks and have someone explain to him the penalties for breaching a sealed registry." A pause. "Gently, we don't want him frightened into talking. We want him frightened into silence. There is a difference, and it is the whole of my career." The clerk returned within the hour, paler than he'd left. Edric Pike had not been at his usual cellar in 2 days. The barman said a girl had come for him, small, dark, foreign, dressed for a funeral, and that Pike had left with her white-faced and had not come back, and that the barman had decided on reflection that he had seen nothing and would continue to see nothing for the foreseeable future. Ashbury set down his quill. So, the boy had not merely filed a petition. The boy had reached Pike first, which meant the boy had reached Mowbray, because only Mowbray knew Pike's name, which meant Mowbray was compromised, which meant the liaison Ashbury had sent across an ocean to keep the boy buried had instead become the shovel that dug him out. Ashbury turned the failure over with the cold thoroughness he turned over everything, and found in it not fear but information. The boy was not flailing. The boy was running an operation, disciplined, sequenced, aimed, and running it from 3,000 miles away through instruments Ashbury could not see, and he had been running it for 5 weeks while Ashbury congratulated himself on a clean disposal. "I underestimated the disposal," Ashbury said aloud to the empty office. It was, for him, a profound admission, and he made it only because there was no one to hear it, and because accuracy was the one luxury he never denied himself. He had made a single error, and he could name it precisely. He had left the boy his wand, his voice, and his wits, because a snapped wand made a martyr, and he had wanted disappearance instead of grievance. It had been the correct choice for every reason except the one that now mattered, which was that the boy had turned out to be the rarest kind of enemy, the kind who does not waste the things you leave him. He did not despair. Despair was for people without resources, and Corvin Ashbury had a faction, a chamber, and 11 days. He began methodically to prepare. If the witnesses could not be silenced, they could be discredited: a drunk technician, a frightened healer, a leg-breaker turned coat to save his own skin, a jealous boy recanting to win back a friend, 4 ruined men with motives to lie. Ashbury had broken stronger testimony than that with a raised eyebrow. If the documents were real, their provenance was theft stolen from sealed registries by a foreign agent, inadmissible, criminal in their very acquisition, and he would say so loudly and let the manner of the proof poison the matter of it. And if the boy himself appeared, well, a convicted curse-caster, exiled for the safety of children, standing in an international chamber to plead his own innocence with stolen papers and bought witnesses, Ashbury could work with that image. He had built a conviction out of less. "He thinks the room is the weapon," Ashbury murmured, drawing a fresh sheet toward him and beginning to list his own witnesses, his own framing, his own sequence. "He thinks because he cannot be barred from the chamber is his. But a chamber belongs to whoever controls the story told inside it, and I have been telling stories in chambers since before that boy was born." He dipped his quill. "Let him come. Let him bring his stolen papers and his ruined men. I will be ready, and I will be calm, and calm has never once lost to clever in a room full of frightened voters." He wrote a heading at the top of the sheet in his cramped looping hand, and the heading was a single word: containment. It was, Harry would observe later, the difference between them in a word. Ashbury had spent 5 weeks certain he could contain the thing he'd started. He had never once considered that the thing he'd started might not wish to be contained, and might, in fact, have been counting on his certainty all along. Ron Weasley gave his statement to Wednesday Addams in the back room of the Leaky Cauldron, and Harry watched it through the mirror, propped on a barrel, because he could not be in the room and would not miss it. Ron looked older, too. 5 weeks had hollowed him the way they'd hollowed Dumbledore, though Harry suspected the hollowing came from a different direction, not the weight of a terrible choice made on purpose, but the slower, grinding weight of a stupid choice made by accident and lived with. He sat across from a small foreign girl in black who frightened him visibly, and he did not run, and Harry gave him that. "You're the one he's with," Ron said to Wednesday. Luna said, "The dangerous one, the one who," he stopped. "She said you claimed him." "I don't know what that means, but I'm glad someone did. Somebody should have. I should have." He looked at the mirror, at Harry's face in the glass, and his ears went red, and he said the thing directly. "Harry, I'm not going to do the part where I cry and you forgive me. You don't have to forgive me, and I'm not going to make you watch me ask. I'm just going to tell the truth in front of the Confederation, the whole truth, how they coached me, how they changed my patrol, how they asked me about the corridor before I'd said I was in it. It'll probably get me done for perjury. Good, I'd rather be the bloke who fixed it than the bloke who broke it and hid." He swallowed. "That's all, that's the statement. Tell me where to stand and when." "Sit down, Mr. Weasley," Wednesday said in the flat contralto, and slid a sheet of parchment across the table. "Write it, all of it, names, dates, the order of the questions. Don't make it noble. The Confederation doesn't weigh nobility, it weighs detail. The man who coached you, describe his face. The patrol order, describe the signature. You're not confessing a sin, you're providing a deposition, and a deposition is only worth the specifics in it. She set a quill beside the parchment. And then you're going to do the most useful thing a guilty man can do, which is to stop performing his guilt and start being precisely, boringly accurate about the facts. Harry doesn't need your remorse, he needs your memory. Give him the memory, keep the remorse, you'll be carrying it a long time and it's yours, and it's the one thing in this that actually belongs to you. Ron looked at her for a moment, then he looked at the mirror. She's terrifying, he told Harry. Yes, Harry said. She's right, though. Yes, Harry said again, she usually is. Write it, Ron, the accurate version. That's all I ever wanted from you, not your sorry, your accuracy. You gave them a true thing and let them build a lie on it. Give me the true things and let me build the truth on them. That squares it. Not the friendship. The friendship's a separate question and a longer one, and we'll get to it or we won't. But the debt squares with the deposition. He paused. Write it well. It's going to help break the man who used us both. And Ron Weasley picked up the quill and bent over the parchment and began in his cramped, blotchy hand to write down every brick he'd handed the men who framed his friend, and across an ocean in a belfry full of red thread, Harry watched another piece of the weapon assemble itself, and felt the strange, cold comfort of a debt being paid in the only currency that had ever mattered to him, which was the truth laid down plain where a held chamber could no longer seal it away. Wednesday came back from London on the 18th day with a sealed affidavit, a stolen registry photograph, a healer's record, and a thin white scar on the back of one hand that she declined to explain beyond the observation that the boy in October would have found it funny. She walked into the belfry, set the documents on the bench, looked at Harry's face, which had carried the Dumbledore conversation for 3 days now, in a quiet he hadn't tried to hide from her because hiding from her was pointless, and said, with the flat precision that was the nearest she came to tenderness, "You talked to the old man. It went the way these things go. You're carrying it well, which I find irritating, because I'd planned to be impressed by your collapse, and now I'll have to be impressed by your composure instead, which is harder to do convincingly." She sat. "Tell me later, or don't. Right now we have a war to design, and I've designed half of it on the flight, and I want to see if your half matches mine." It did. That was the thing about them, the thing Harry had stopped being surprised by and started quietly to depend on. When they sat down to build something dangerous, they built the same thing from opposite ends and met in the middle without a seam. The Confederation petition had been filed 2 days before, a dense, immaculate document Harry had drafted, and a sympathetic Confederation jurist in Geneva had agreed to sponsor, alleging that the conviction underlying Harry's treaty transfer had been procured by fraud and demanding a convocation to hear evidence. It had done exactly what Harry predicted. The instant it was logged, Ashbury's trusteeship motion was automatically stayed. You could not convert the administration of a minor's estate to a permanent trust, while an international body was actively examining whether the conviction the administration rested on was a lie. The clock had frozen. And the convocation had been set, 11 days hence, in the neutral chamber of the Confederation's London consulate, neutral ground, internationally administered on British soil but outside British jurisdiction. A room where Harry could appear by the Confederation's own writ without triggering the forfeiture clause, because he would be entering not Britain but the Confederation's own protected space, the one threshold Ashbury's clever exile could not bar him from. "He has to come," Harry said, standing before the wall where the threads now formed a single converging weapon. "That's the elegant part. A Confederation convocation into a fraudulent conviction summons the convicting authority to answer. Ashbury is the administrating officer of my estate and the architect of my conviction. He can't send a proxy, can't appear by projection from a safe distance the way he did in the Great Hall. He has to stand in that chamber in person and answer the petition, because if he refuses the convocation, the Confederation can void the conviction by default and unwind everything he's built, and he can't afford that, so he'll come, thinking he can manage the room the way he's managed every room. He'll bring lawyers, he'll bring his faction's weight, he'll have a story ready for every document." Harry's mouth twisted. "And none of it will help him, because I'm not going to attack his story. I'm going to do what I learned in his own courtroom. I'm going to make him answer questions in real time that he can't predict, with witnesses he doesn't know we have, until the room watches the machine reveal itself. The detonation isn't the documents are the fuse. The detonation is Ashbury on his feet, improvising lies in front of the Confederation, while the men who built his machine recant one after another from a bench he didn't know was full. That's your front," Wednesday said. "The chamber, the law, the public unmaking. It's good, it's very good. It will strip him of the estate and the seat and the faction and the conviction, and the wizarding world will read it in the morning paper and learn what it threw away." She rose and crossed to the wall and laid her pale fingers on 3 of the names, not Ashbury-s, but the 3 below it, Vane, Pike, Mowbray. "But the chamber is for Ashbury, because Ashbury's crime was a paper crime, a theft, and paper is the right weapon for it." The other three didn't steal an estate. They forged a wand and faked a curse and came to a foreign school to plant evidence on a child. Their crimes were physical. They put their hands on the actual instruments. The law will reach them eventually, slowly, with appeals and delays and the mercy that money buys. The black eyes came up to his, and they were very cold and very calm. I don't intend to wait for the law to reach the hands. The hands are mine. While you unmake Ashbury in the chamber with the truth, I'm going to find Selwyn Vane, who built the trap that ended your life, and I'm going to make him understand fully, personally, at close range, exactly what he did and exactly who he did it to. That's the parallel reckoning. Your front is justice. Mine is the older thing justice was invented to replace, because justice is slow and I am not. She tilted her head. You disapprove. I can see you disapproving. Say it. Harry looked at her and examined his own disapproval the way she'd taught him to examine everything, and found that it was thinner than he expected. I don't disapprove of the reckoning, he said slowly. Vane earned whatever's coming. So did Pike, so did Mowbray, so did Quentin and Ashbury most of all. What I won't do, what I need you not to do, is kill them, not because they don't deserve it. Because the moment we kill them, we become the thing they accused me of being, and we hand the wizarding world the story it wanted all along. The dangerous boy and his dangerous girl, monsters after all, who answered a frame with murder. The whole point, the entire architecture of what we've built, is that we win clean. We make the law admit it lied in public on the record, with the machine exposed and the maker's own confessions in the room. A corpse can't confess. A corpse is just a dead enemy, and dead enemies make martyrs and reasonable doubt. I need them alive and broken and talking. Ruined, not removed, their reputations in ash, their crimes on the record, their lives spent in the consequences. He held her gaze. Make Vane understand what he did. Make him understand it so completely it follows him to the grave he dies in 50 years from now. But let it be a long grave, Wednesday, the longest one. Ruin is worse than death anyway. You taught me that the day you broke Bianca with a sentence and left her alive to feel it. For a long moment Wednesday Addams considered him, and her white face was unreadable, and then something in it settled, not disappointment, he saw, but a recalibration, the look of a woman who has had a sharper instrument handed to her than the one she'd planned to use. Ruin is worse than death, she repeated, tasting it. You're right, I was reaching for the crude tool because it's the one my hands know. But you've just described something better, to take the thing each of them built their life on and pull it out from under them and leave them standing in the wreckage alive, for years, watching everyone learn what they are. Her mouth did the not smile, slow and genuinely delighted, the most frightening expression he had ever seen her wear. Vane's whole life is his reputation as the most brilliant curse tracer of his generation. I'm going to take it. I'm going to make him recant his own masterpiece in front of the Confederation, confess that the proudest work of his career was a forgery, and then I'm going to make sure he lives a very long time as the man who was caught, the genius who got greedy, the artist who signed his fraud. He'll wish I'd killed him. That's so much better than killing him. Harry, that's art. She crossed to her case and began with great care to repack the instruments she would not, after all, be needing. I take it back. I'm impressed by your composure, after all. It turns out the boy who talked to the old man and didn't break came home colder and cleaner and crueler than I am, and I've been trying to be the cruelest thing in every room since I was 4. A pause. It's the most romantic thing that's ever happened to me. Don't respond to that. I'll deny I said it and thing will back me up. The hand on the desk made a gesture that was unmistakably the opposite of backing her up. Harry almost smiled. He turned back to the wall instead, to the converging weapon of red thread, and looked at the 11 days that stood between this belfry and the Confederation chamber, and at the names that would, in 11 days, finally have to answer for the boy they'd thrown away. 11 days, he said. We have the documents. We have the witnesses. Pike recants the forgery. The healer recants the curse. Ron recants the testimony. Mowbray confirms the surveillance in the second frame. We have the motive in the public record under Ashbury's own name. We have the law on neutral ground where his machine has no power. And we have a plan for every one of them, ruin for the makers, the chamber for the architect, and the truth, finally, loud enough that no held chamber on earth can seal it. He capped the last thread. 5 weeks ago they shipped me across an ocean and told the world I was a monster, and they were so certain the dangerous part was over that they left me my wand, my voice, and my wits, and went home to divide the estate of a boy they'd already buried. He turned from the wall, and the cold thing in his chest had become, at last, something with a clean and final edge. In 11 days, in a room they can't control, every one of them is going to learn what they threw away. Let's go and teach them. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6. The Reckoning. The Confederation chamber in the London consulate was a circle, which Harry approved of, because a circle had no head of the table and no dais and no high seat from which a tired old man could deliver an arithmetic of sacrifice. It was a room built to make everyone in it equal, and Corvin Ashbury had spent 30 years winning rooms built to make him superior, and Harry intended the geometry alone to cost him something before either of them said a word. Harry walked in under the Confederation's writ, which meant he walked onto neutral ground without his wand forfeiture triggering, and he felt the threshold pass under his feet like a held breath released. He had not stood on land governed by Britain in 2 months. He still was. The consulate floor was international soil, and the distinction was the whole reason he was alive and armed and present, and he savored it for exactly one step before he put it away and went to work. The chamber filled. Confederation delegates in the muted robes of a dozen nations ringed the upper benches, the audience Ashbury could not buy, the members whose treaty he had abused. Below them the principals, Harry with his folder of documents and his Geneva jurist beside him, and across the circle, Corvin Ashbury in person at last, no longer a green projection in the air but a spare elegant man of flesh and silver hair, flanked by 3 British lawyers and the quiet weight of his faction. He looked at Harry across the circle with the calm, courteous, assessing attention of a master examining the board, and Harry looked back, and neither of them performed anything, and the 2 seconds of that mutual flat appraisal told each of them everything about how hard the next hours would be. Wednesday was not in the chamber. That was by design. Wednesday had a different appointment on different ground with a different man, and Harry put the thought of where she was and what she was doing into the cold locked place where he kept the things he could not afford to feel during work, and he turned to the presiding jurist and began. He did not begin with the documents. Ashbury expected the documents. Ashbury had spent 11 days preparing to poison the documents with the manner of their acquisition. So Harry began, instead, with a question. "Madam President," he said to the presiding delegate, a severe Nigerian witch who held the convocation's gavel, "before any evidence is heard, I'd ask the administering officer one question on the record. It's a simple question and it costs nothing to answer, and I think the chamber will find his answer instructive." He turned to Ashbury, Undersecretary. "On what date did you first form the belief that I was guilty?" Ashbury's lawyers stirred. Ashbury himself did not. He understood. Harry saw that a refusal to answer a simple question in front of the Confederation looked worse than any answer, and so he answered in his hinge-smooth voice with the ease of a man who has prepared every reply but this one. "On the date of your conviction, naturally, when the evidence was presented and weighed. Not before. How could I believe a thing before it was proven? That's what I'd like the chamber to hold on to," Harry said, mild. "You formed your belief in my guilt on the date of the conviction from the evidence presented. So did everyone. So would I have in their place. The evidence was overwhelming." He let that land, let Ashbury's lawyers relax a fraction at the apparent concession. "Now, I'm going to show this chamber that every piece of that overwhelming evidence was manufactured, and I'm going to do it not with stolen papers, which you'll tell us are inadmissible, but with the testimony of the men who manufactured it, freely given here today. And when I'm done, I'm going to ask you that same question again, on what date you first formed your belief in my guilt, and the chamber is going to understand why the honest answer was never the date of the conviction. It was 11 months earlier, the day you commissioned the machine." He turned to the president. "I call my first witness, Edric Pike of the Department of Mysteries." The chamber doors opened and a small gray man came in, and Corvin Ashbury's composed face did not change at all, which was, to anyone watching closely, the most expensive thing it had ever done. Edric Pike had been sober for 11 days, which Wednesday had arranged with a thoroughness Harry didn't inquire into, and a sober Pike was a different creature from the bottle-gray wreck of the nocturne cellar. He sat in the witness chair in the center of the circle under the eyes of a dozen nations, and he told them in a flat, exhausted monotone how he had operated the mnemonic engine on the 3rd of October, on the instruction of a requisition that bore no name but came down the right channels, and how he had taken a holly wand and emptied it of its true history and written into it, layer by layer, a false casting memory of a bile curse, and primed the forgery to disgorge itself on cue the first time anyone performed a priori incantatem. "Describe the signature," Harry said. "You told me a forged casting memory leaves marks. Describe them to the chamber." "The engine leaves a grain," Pike said, "like tool marks on a forged coin. A real casting memory forms in the wood organically. It's got a sort of randomness to it, the randomness of an actual moment. A written one is too clean. The layers are too even. Anyone who knows to look, anyone who's operated the engine, can hold a wand and tell you in 10 seconds whether the memory grew or was printed." He looked for the first time directly at Harry. "That boy's wand was printed. I printed it. I'd swear it on the engine itself. The priori that convicted him showed a memory I wrote with my own hands 11 days before the crime it supposedly recorded." The upper benches had gone very quiet. "And the requisition that ordered the forgery," Harry said. "It bore no name, but it came down a channel." "Whose channel?" "Objection," said the senior of Ashbury's lawyers, rising. "The witness is a self-confessed forger testifying to escape his own liability. His word is worth nothing and his channels are speculation." "The witness is a self-confessed forger," Harry agreed before the president could rule. "I confess it for him. He forged my wand. He's guilty. I'm not asking the chamber to admire him. I'm asking the chamber to notice that a man with no reason to love me has just confessed to a crime that carries a decade in a cell in front of an international body on the record, knowing it damns him, and to ask itself the obvious question." He turned slowly, taking in the upper benches. Why would he do that? Why would a guilty man volunteer his own ruin? There's only one answer that fits, because the alternative was worse. Because the man who commissioned the forgery cleans up his instruments when they become inconvenient, and Mr. Pike worked out 11 days ago that he had become inconvenient, and decided that a cell on the right side of the truth was safer than a free man on the wrong side of Corvin Ashbury. He let it sit. That's not the testimony of a man lying to save himself. That's the testimony of a man who's already calculated that the truth is the only thing left that might keep him alive. The chamber should weigh it accordingly. Ashbury rose. It was the first time he had risen, and the chamber turned to him, and he spoke with perfect calm. Madam President, this is theater. A foreign agent, a schoolgirl, I'm given to understand, of a certain notorious family entered British jurisdiction, breached a sealed Department of Mysteries registry, and abducted a vulnerable ministry employee, who now repeats whatever story preserves him from the consequences of his own crimes. The papers are stolen, the witness is suborned, and the petitioner is a convicted curse-caster who was removed from this country precisely because he is dangerous, clever, and entirely without scruple, as this elaborate production demonstrates. He inclined his silver head. I do not fear the truth. I fear the abuse of this chamber by a brilliant, embittered child and his criminal accomplices. I ask only that the convocation hold his evidence to the standard its tainted origins deserve, which is to say, none. It was, Harry conceded silently, very good. It was the containment strategy executed flawlessly. Poison the witness, poison the papers, poison the petitioner, and reframe the whole proceeding as the dangerous boy's latest dangerous trick. Half the upper benches were nodding. Ashbury had not survived 30 years in chambers by being slow, and he had just turned Harry's strongest witness into evidence for the prosecution's original case. Harry had been waiting for exactly this. The undersecretary, Harry said, says the witness is suborned and the papers are stolen and asks you to weigh them as nothing. Reasonable. I'd ask the same in his place. He opened his folder. So let's set Mr. Pike aside. Let's set the papers aside. Let's pretend I never reached the technician, never touched the registry, never had a single document. I'm going to prove the forgery another way, a way the undersecretary cannot call stolen or suborned, because it's sitting in my pocket, it has been in my possession the entire time, and it belongs to me. He drew his wand from his robes and laid it on the table in the center of the circle, in the full sight of a dozen nations. This is the wand that supposedly cast the curse. Mr. Pike says he forged its memory, and that the forgery leaves a grain that any engine operator can read in 10 seconds. The undersecretary says Mr. Pike is a liar. Harry looked up and his voice was very level. Then let's not take Mr. Pike's word. Let's ask a neutral engine operator, one the Confederation appoints here now, whom I have never met and cannot have suborned, to examine this wand in front of the chamber and tell you whether its casting memory grew or was printed. If it grew, I'm a fraud and a forger of my own defense, and you should expel me and let the undersecretary keep my family's estate with the chamber's blessing. He held Ashbury's eyes across the circle. And if it was printed, if a Confederation specialist holds my wand and finds the grain of a forgery in it, then everything the undersecretary just said about suborned witnesses and stolen papers becomes irrelevant, because the wand will have testified, and the wand cannot be abducted from a cellar or stolen from a registry. It's been mine all along. He turned to the president. Madam President, appoint your own specialist. Let the wand speak. I'll abide by whatever it says. Will the undersecretary? The chamber turned as one to Corvin Ashbury, and for the first time in the entire proceeding, for the first time Harry suspected, in a very long time, Corvin Ashbury was silent for a beat too long. The president lifted her gavel to appoint the specialist, and that was the moment Selwyn Vane decided the wand could not be allowed to speak. Harry had wondered in the 11 days of preparation what Vane would do. The man was an artist, and artists did not recant. A forger who confessed his forgery destroyed the one thing he valued more than freedom, which was the belief that he was the best. Wednesday had spent 4 days in Britain shadowing him, and her last message through the mirror had been 3 flat words: he knows. He's moving, and Harry had carried those 3 words into the chamber and built the one gambit precisely as bait, because a forger who could not recant and could not flee had only one move left, and Harry had laid his own wand on the table in the center of the room to make the move irresistible. The chamber doors did not open. The high window did. It came apart in a spray of leaded glass and a clap of displaced air, and Selwyn Vane came through it on a streak of pale fire, his 2 fine robes snapping, his long, clever face stripped at last of its courteous composure and showing the thing underneath, not fear Harry saw, but fury, the specific fury of a craftsman watching a fool threaten to break his masterpiece. And his pale, not holly wand was already swinging toward the table, toward the holly wand lying exposed in the center of the circle. With a curse on his lips that would have reduced 11 inches of forged evidence to ash and smoke and reasonable doubt before any specialist could read its grain, 2 people moved before the glass finished falling. Harry had his hand on his wand the instant the window broke. He had been 3 feet from it by design, because he had known the bait might be taken, and he did not reach for the curse Vane expected. He reached for the wand itself, snatched it off the table, and rolled away from the obvious destroying line, and Vane's ash curse cracked the empty black wood of the table in half and set nothing alight, because the target was already gone, already moving, already in Harry's fist where it belonged. And Wednesday Addams came through the broken window 2 seconds behind Vane, because she had been on his heels across half of London, because he knows, he's moving had also meant and I am moving with him, and she hit the consulate floor in a roll that came up with the sharpened foil already extended, and her flat voice cut across the chaos of the chamber with the only words she'd brought. "Hello, Professor, you're a difficult man to walk behind. I've been doing it for 4 days. I learned a great deal about how you breathe before a lie." What followed lasted under 90 seconds, and Harry would remember it for the rest of his life as the first time he fought beside someone who fit his hands. Vane was good, Department of Mysteries good, a specialist's reflexes and a decade of cursecraft, and he was cornered, which made him fast and reckless and lethal. He whipped a barrier into being and shattered the witness chairs into a hail of splinters and sent the upper benches scattering, and for a moment the elegant circle of the Confederation chamber became a storm of pale fire and flying wood. But Vane had spent 11 months building a trap out of paper and patience, and he had forgotten, in the way clever men forget, that some problems cannot be forged around. They have to be fought, and Selwyn Vane had not fought anyone in years, and the two children coming at him from opposite arcs of the circle had been fighting each other in a fencing hall at midnight for 5 weeks, learning each other's timing until they shared it. They did not call to each other. They didn't need to. Harry took the magic and Wednesday took the distance, and they had practiced this exact division without ever naming it. Harry's banishing charm slammed into Vane's barrier from the left, not to break it. He knew he couldn't break a mystery's barrier head-on, but to push it, to tilt the man's guard a handspan toward the door he wasn't watching. And in the handspan, in the quarter-second the barrier lined, Wednesday was simply there, inside his guard where the barrier wasn't, the sharpened foil flicking out with the boneless economy of a thing she'd done 10,000 times, and she put 35 inches of honed steel through the meat of Selwyn Vane's wand hand, pinning it, and the pale knot-holly wand clattered to the international floor. Vane screamed and wrenched and brought his free hand up, clawing for a wandless working, and Harry was already there for that, because they had drilled the second exchange too. If she takes the wand hand, you take the second hand, and his stunning spell caught Vane square in the chest at a range of 4 feet and folded the artist backward over the wreckage of a witness chair, twitching, disarmed, undone, his ruined hand still pinned to the splintered wood by a schoolgirl's foil. His masterpiece intact in the fist of the boy he'd forged it onto. The chamber was dead silent. A dozen nations stared. Harry rose, breathing hard, the holly wand hole in his hand, and looked down at the man who had ended his life 11 months ago with a coil of cord and a printed memory. And then he looked across the wreckage at Wednesday, who stood over Vane with one foot on his chest and her foil's grip still trembling faintly with the impact, her 2 braids barely disarranged, her white face perfectly composed, and the black eyes meeting his with a glitter he had come to understand was the closest she came to joy. "You telegraphed with your shoulder on the banishing charm," she informed him flatly across the ruined chamber in front of the assembled Confederation. "We'll work on it. You came in 2 seconds late," Harry said. "I came in through a window I had to break first. You came in from a chair. The handicaps are not comparable." She removed her foot from Vane's chest and her boot from the floor, and turned to the president of the convocation, who was standing frozen with her gavel half raised, and Wednesday addressed the highest court of the magical world with the unbothered courtesy of a girl reporting a minor weather event. "Madam President, you'll forgive the entrance. This is Professor Selwyn Vane, formerly of the Department of Mysteries, lately of Hogwarts. He's the man who forged the wand currently in Mr. Potter's. I would draw the chamber's attention to the fact that he has just flown through a window and attempted to destroy that wand before your appointed specialist could examine it." She tilted her head. "An innocent man does not break into an international tribunal to incinerate the evidence of his innocence. Only a forger does that, and only when he knows the evidence will convict him. He has, in the last 90 seconds, confessed more completely than any testimony could, in the one language a man like this cannot lie in, which is the language of what he was willing to risk to keep that wand from speaking." She looked down at Vane, stunned and pinned and ruined on the floor. "Examine the wand now, Madam President. He's told you what you'll find. He told you with the window." Corvin Ashbury across the circle had not moved through the entire 90 seconds. He stood among his scattering lawyers, silver and spare and very still, and Harry looked at him through the settling dust of the wrecked chamber and watched the master understand at last and completely that he had lost not the legal argument which had still been winnable 90 seconds ago, but the room, because the room had just watched the architect of the frame send his own forger crashing through a window to destroy the proof, and there was no story in the world, however well told. That could unring that bell. The president of the Confederation lowered her gavel slowly. She looked at the stunned forger and the whole wand in the petitioner's hand, and the small foreign girl standing over the wreckage, and the spare, elegant man across the circle whose face had finally, after 30 years, begun to come apart. "Appoint the specialist," she said quietly to her clerk. "Let the wand be examined, and clear the chamber of glass." She turned to Ashbury, and her voice was the voice of a woman who has seen exactly which way a thing falls. "Undersecretary, you may wish to consult your counsel. I think you are going to need them." The Confederation's specialist was a stooped wandwright from Krakow who had never heard of Harry Potter and cared less, and she held the holly wand under a glass that magnified the grain of its memory, and she examined it for rather longer than 10 seconds, and then she set it down and addressed the chamber in heavily accented English with the bored certainty of an expert stating the obvious. "This memory is printed," she said. "The casting record in this wand did not grow. It was written in layers with an engine. You see here the regularity, no living moment is so even, and then sealed to release on a priori. I have examined 10,000 wands. I have not seen forgery this fine in 20 years. She looked mildly at the wreckage and the pinned forger. "Whoever made it was an artist. He should be ashamed. Such a gift spent on a lie against a child." She handed the wand back to Harry with a small nod. "It was not you who cast a curse, young man. This wand has never cast a curse in its life. Someone told it to remember one. The someone is very good and should be in a cell." After that, the rest came down like a wall that had been waiting only for the first stone to move. The witnesses recanted in sequence, and Harry called them in the order he had built across 5 weeks, each one removing a load-bearing piece of the conviction. The healer testified that Quentin Ashbury had been admitted with a survivable humor imbalance and walked out in 9 days, and that the near-fatal bowel curse had been a description written for a courtroom over a boy who had never been in danger, and produced the sealed record to prove it. And when Ashbury's lawyers rose to call the record stolen, the president observed dryly that a witness was entitled to read from his own clinical notes, and the objection died. Quentin Ashbury himself, summoned under Confederation compulsion and faced with his own healer's record, broke in under a minute, because Quentin was a boy who had agreed to lie still for the cameras for an uncle's promise, and had never once imagined being asked to defend the lie under oath in front of the world. And his stammering, collapsing account of how his uncle had arranged the attack was, Harry thought, almost the cruelest testimony of all. Because it came from the supposed victim, and it left nothing standing. Gideon Mowbray testified by sworn deposition. He had bought his head start with it, and kept the bargain, because a man who has run for a boarder honors the contract that let him reach it. And the deposition described the surveillance, the intercepted mail, the second curse kit shipped from London to be planted on a treaty-protected minor on foreign soil, all of it on the instruction of the office of Corvin Ashbury, by channels Mowbray named and dates Mowbray supplied. And Ron Weasley stood in the wrecked circle of the Confederation chamber, red-eared and steady, and read his deposition aloud in his cramped, blotchy voice, and told a dozen nations how a ministry man had coached him through his testimony 3 times before the hearing, how his patrol had been forged onto a different route to put him in the corridor on the chosen night, how they had asked him about the corridor before he had ever said he'd been in it. He did not perform his guilt. Wednesday had cured him of that. He gave the chamber the accurate version, the boring, specific, damning version, and when one of Ashbury's lawyers tried to shake him by pointing out that his own testimony made him a perjurer, Ron simply said, "Yeah, I lied. I'm telling you I lied in front of everyone, knowing what it does to me because the bloke I lied about didn't do it and I helped them say he did. You can do me for perjury after. I'll plead to it. But you're going to hear the true version first," and the lawyer sat down because there's no cross-examining a man who has already convicted himself to tell the truth. When the last witness stepped down, the conviction of Harry James Potter lay in pieces on the international floor, beside the wreckage of the witness chairs and the leaded glass of the window cell when Vane had come through, and Harry rose for the last time to address the chamber. He did not gloat. He had decided weeks ago in a belfry full of red thread that he would not gloat because gloating was a thing you did when winning surprised you, and Harry had never once doubted he would win. He had only doubted whether he would be allowed to be in the room when he did. He was in the room, that was enough. "Madam President," he said. 11 months ago, a man decided that the cleanest way to take a dead family's estate from its last living heir was to make the heir into a monster, to forge a wand, stage a victim, coach a witness, and convict a 16-year-old of a crime that never happened, then ship him across an ocean so he could not contest the theft in person before he came of age. It was a brilliant machine. It turned a lie into law at every stage, distributed so thin across so many legal acts that no single act looked like a crime. It very nearly worked. It would have worked if the man who built it had made one different choice at the end. He looked across the circle at Corvin Ashbury. "He left me my wand. He wanted disappearance instead of a martyr, so he let the boy keep his magic and his voice and his wits, and shipped him somewhere he was certain no one would ever fight for him." Harry's mouth turned very slightly. He was wrong about that last part. He shipped me to a school full of monsters, and the monsters looked at what Britain had thrown away, and one of them decided it was worth keeping. So here we are." He set the holly wand back in his pocket. "I ask the convocation to void the conviction as procured by fraud, to vacate the trusteeship motion and every administration of my family's interests taken under the fraudulent conviction, and to refer the architects of the machine, Selwyn Vane, Edric Pike, and Corvin Ashbury, to the appropriate authorities of their own in this body. I don't ask for revenge. I've found that the truth, said loud enough in a room that can't seal it, is its own kind of revenge, and a cleaner one than the alternatives." A pause. "That's all, Madam President. The wand has spoken. The witnesses have spoken. I'll let them stand." The convocation retired for 40 minutes. Harry counted them, the way he had counted the 11 minutes in the Great Hall, and the symmetry was not lost on him, and he let himself, for the first time in 2 months, feel the weight of what was about to be lifted. When they returned, the President of the Confederation read the finding into the record in a clear, unhurried voice, and the finding was everything. The conviction of Harry James Potter was void, procured by fraud, struck from every register in which it had ever appeared, in Britain and in the Confederation both. The trusteeship motion was vacated. Every interest of the Potter and Peveril estates administered under the fraudulent conviction was ordered restored to the heir, with a full accounting of what had been done with them in the interim. The demand for that accounting alone enough to finish Corvin Ashbury, because the accounting would show exactly what an administrator does with a fortune he believes he will never have to return. The wand forfeiture and the exile, having rested entirely on the void conviction, were dissolved. Harry Potter was free to return to Britain or remain abroad as he chose, a full and unencumbered citizen of the magical world, his name clean in every chamber that had struck it. And the 3 architects were referred for prosecution, Vane and Pike to the Confederation's own courts, since their crimes had touched its registries and its chamber, and Corvin Ashbury to a special session of the very Wisengamot he had spent 30 years controlling, which would now, with his faction shattered and his machine exposed in the international record, convene to consider the fall of one of its own. Corvin Ashbury received the finding standing alone, his lawyers already drifting from him the way followers drift from a siren whose voice has stopped working. He did not protest. He was to the end too intelligent to protest. He gathered the last of his composure, which was considerable, and he looked across the wrecked circle at the boy who had unmade him, and he did something none of them expected, least of all Harry. He inclined his head. A fraction. The exact fraction Harry had given a siren in a refectory 2 months before. "I made one error in the disposal of you," Corvin Ashbury said, in the hinge-smooth voice that had ordered the forging of a child's wand. "I have spent 11 days identifying it precisely, because accuracy is the one luxury I have never denied myself, and I will not deny it now at the end. I left you your wand. I wanted you gone rather than martyred, and so I left you the means to come back, and I told myself you would never find the door." The pale eyes held Harry's, and there was in them something almost like the respect one master pays another across a finished board. "I have removed a great many inconvenient people in 30 years. You are the first one who declined to stay removed. I underestimated what a discarded thing will do when you leave it sharp." He straightened his cuffs, an old man's reflex, the last gesture of a vanished authority. "Enjoy your estate, Mr. Potter. I built you a very good prison. You'll forgive me if I take some professional satisfaction in the fact that it took the truth, an international tribunal, a forger through a window, and the most dangerous girl in America to break it. Lesser machines have held lesser men forever." And he turned and walked out of the chamber that had been his life, into the prosecution that would end it, with the appalling dignity of a man who had lost everything and intended to lose it correctly. Harry watched him go and felt none of the triumph he had expected, and a great deal of something colder and more complete. "You should have killed him," Wednesday observed beside him, watching the spare silver figure recede. "He's going to spend his trial being magnificent, and some people will admire him for it, and he'll die in a cell convinced he was the cleverest man in every room he ever lost." She tilted her head. "On the other hand, he's going to die in a cell having been unmade by a child he threw away, with the whole world reading the manner of his unmaking in the morning paper. Ruin is worse than death. You were right, I'm noting it. I note all your correct predictions now. The list is becoming inconveniently long." A pause. "It's the most attractive quality a person can have. Don't respond to that either." Harry looked at the wrecked, emptying chamber, at the void conviction, the restored name the architects led away, the dozen nations filing out into a world that would, by morning, know exactly what had been done to him and exactly who had done it, and then at the small, straight-backed girl in black who had come through a window 2 seconds late and put a sword through the hand of the man who ended his life. "Thank you," he said, "just that. She'd despise more." "I don't do gratitude either," Wednesday said. "But I'll allow it this once because you've earned the lapse." The black eyes glinted. "Come, there's one more thing to settle, and it isn't in this chamber, and it isn't a man we prosecute. It's the old one, the one at the top of the wall." She started for the broken window because she had no intention of using a door when a window was available. You said you deface him last, as the verdict, not the wrong child. Well. She glanced back at him and her flat voice was almost gentle, which from her was almost unbearable. You're the verdict now, Harry. It's written into the international record in a dozen languages. Go and be it. The press was waiting on the consulate steps because the press is always waiting wherever a great man falls, and the fall of Corvin Ashbury and the vindication of the boy who lived in the same hour was the largest thing to happen to magical Britain in 5 years. Harry walked out into a storm of shouted questions and exploding flashbulbs, and he did not run from it because he had learned the price of letting other people tell your story, and he intended this once to tell his own. He stopped at the top of the steps. He waited for the noise to break against his stillness and recede, the way it always did, the way he'd made it recede in a frost-rimed courtyard 2 months before. And when it was quiet enough, he gave them 3 sentences, because 3 sentences travel and a speech does not. 11 months ago, a man forged a wand and faked a crime to convict me of attempted murder so that he could steal my family's estate while I was too discredited to stop him, Harry said in the level voice that carried. Today, an international tribunal found every part of it to be fraud, restored my name, and referred the men who did it for prosecution. I'd ask everyone reading this to remember one thing: they almost got away with it, and the only reason they didn't is that they were careless enough to leave a thrown-away boy his wand. He paused and let the flashbulbs catch the next part. Be careful what you throw away. It might come back better armed than you can imagine. Good afternoon. He went down the steps and the press boiled after him, and the next morning his 3 sentences were on the front of every magical paper in Europe, over a photograph of a thin dark boy at the top of a flight of consulate stairs with a small girl in black at his shoulder, and the wizarding world that had shipped him across an ocean and divided his estate woke up to discover, all at once and far too late, exactly what it had thrown away. Ron found him on the consulate steps after the press had thinned, hands in his pockets, ears red, looking like a boy who had run out of borrowed courage and was operating now on the unborrowed kind, which is harder. So that's it then, Ron said. You won, you took the whole thing apart. Ashbury, Vane, all of it. He scuffed the step. I gave my bit. The perjury thing, they'll do me for it eventually, but the Confederation bloke said since I recanted voluntarily it'll likely be a fine and a record, not Azkaban, so I'll live with it. He looked up. I'm not going to ask if we're all right. We're not all right. I know we're not. I just wanted to say, before you go back to wherever you're going, before whatever happens next, I'm glad it was you. I'm glad the one they couldn't keep down was you. Even when I was angry at you, even when I let them use it, some part of me always knew if anybody was going to crawl back from being buried, it'd be you. He stuck out his hand, the way he had the first day on the train, 6 years and a lifetime ago. Mates were the wrong word for what I was this year, but I'd like the chance to earn it back to being the right one, someday, if you ever want. Harry looked at the hand. He thought about the boy who had read a coached line in a converted great hall and would not meet his eyes. He thought about the boy who had written I'd rather be the idiot who got used and admitted it than the coward who got used and kept quiet. He thought about how the second boy did not erase the first, and how the first did not have to be the end of the second, and how a friendship, unlike a conviction, was not a verdict you handed down but a thing you chose to rebuild or chose not to slowly in the unromantic currency of accuracy and time. He did not take the hand, not yet, but he didn't turn from it either. Not today, Harry said. Maybe not for a long time. You didn't lie, Ron. That's the thing I keep coming back to. You said something true and let them weaponize it, and you found it easier to believe the worst of me than the best, and that's a real thing, and it doesn't vanish because you fixed it. But you came back. You wrote it down where it could hurt you. You stood in that chamber and convicted yourself to tell the truth. He met his old friend's eyes. That's not nothing. It's not friendship yet, but it's the foundation you build friendship on, and you laid it yourself, knowing the cost. So not today, but write to me. Boring letters, accurate ones, we'll see what they add up to. A pause and the ghost of something that wasn't quite a smile. Wednesday says people who help you to relieve their own guilt abandon you the moment the guilt is paid down. Prove her wrong. She keeps a list. Get on the right side of it. It's a short list and the company's good. Ron let out a breath that was half a laugh and put his hand away and nodded, and it was, somehow, more than a handshake would have been, because it was honest about the distance and willing to cross it anyway. She's still terrifying, Ron said. Yes, Harry said. Write the letters, Ron. And Ron Weasley went back into the consulate to do his small, painful part in the paperwork of his own perjury, and Harry watched him go, and the cold thing in his chest had room, now, for the first time in 2 months, to hold something other than the work. Wednesday was waiting at the bottom of the steps. He had not come up. She had let him have the press and the friend without her, which from her was an act of nearly violent restraint, and she watched him descend with the flat black attention that he had stopped finding unnerving and started finding, against every instinct he had, like coming home. You didn't go to the old man, she observed. I pointed you at him. You didn't go. You let him read the verdict in the paper like everyone else. I already faced him, Harry said, through the mirror. I said everything that needed saying, and the thing I said was that he didn't get to be redeemed by my war, that he got to watch it from his chair knowing he chose not to fight it. He looked out over the London street, gray and ordinary, the most dangerous city in his world, and for the first time in 2 months, a place he could simply stand in. Going to him again now, in the hour of winning, to make him watch me be vindicated, that would be a wronged child wanting to be seen winning. I told you I wouldn't be that, I'd be the verdict. He turned to her. The verdict doesn't need to visit the man it convicts, it just is, and he lives in it. Dumbledore's going to read that finding in a dozen languages, and every word of it is going to say the same thing to him. The boy you spent because he was strong enough to survive it didn't need spending. He came back and won the war you were too frightened to fight, and he did it without you. That's the consequence, not a confrontation. In absence, he spent his whole life being the man everyone came to, the one who held the strings, the necessary center. The worst thing I can do to him isn't to shout at him. It's to win completely, publicly, permanently, and never need him again. He breathed out. Let him sit in his tower and read the record. That's the verdict. I'm done visiting it on people. I'd rather go home. Something moved in Wednesday's white face, and it was not the not smile, and it was not the predator's settle. It was something newer, something Harry had watched assemble itself over 5 weeks of red thread and midnight steel, and which neither of them had a word for yet. Home, she repeated. You said home. You meant the school, the one full of monsters. She tilted her head, the lens adjusting. 2 months ago they shipped you there as a punishment, and you've just been handed back everything you lost, your name, your fortune, your country, the right to walk into any chamber in Britain with your head up, and the word you used for where you want to go is the prison they exiled you to. The black eyes held his. Say it again. I want to be certain I heard it. I'm rarely uncertain about what I hear, but this seems important enough to confirm. Home, Harry said, nevermore with you. He held her gaze and did not flinch, and had no desire to. They tried to throw me into the dark Wednesday, and instead they threw me to the one person who looked at the dark in me and called it interesting and decided to keep it. I'm not giving that back to reclaim a country that fed me to a frame. The country can have my name on its rolls and my gold in its vaults and my seat in its chamber. I'll use them, their tools, and I never waste a tool. But the thing they can't have, the thing I crossed an ocean and won a war to keep, is the one item they didn't know they were handing me when they exiled me to a school full of monsters. He almost smiled, and this time he let it most of the way out, which for him was a great deal. So yes, home, if the claim still stands. Wednesday Adams looked at him for a long moment on the gray London street under the indifferent sky, with a fallen empire smoking behind them and a dozen newspapers about to make them the most famous outcasts in the magical world. The claim stands, she said. It was never conditional. I told you in October I don't defend a thing to the point of convenience. I defend it past it because it's mine. She turned at last toward the alley and the long way back to the school that had become, against all the designs of the men who'd built his exile, the only place either of them had ever wanted to be. Come home, Harry, we've won the war. Now I want to show you the part that comes after, and I warn you in advance, I have no idea how to do it. I've never wanted an after with anyone, and I intend to be very bad at it, with great commitment. A pause, and her flat voice carried back to him, dry as winter. Don't make it sentimental, it's just the most important thing that's ever happened to me. Walk faster. I dislike being moved, and it's your fault, and I'd like to be home before I have to feel any more of it. Harry laughed, actually laughed, the first time in 2 months, the sound surprising both of them, and went down into the gray London afternoon at the side of the most dangerous girl in America, vindicated, untouchable, and for the first time since a green window cut to black in a converted great hall, entirely unafraid of what came next. Behind them, the wizarding world picked through the wreckage of what it had thrown away. Ahead of them was home. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7. Claimed and ascendant, the offers began arriving before Harry had finished unpacking the trunk he'd packed 2 months ago under the eyes of 2 orders. They came by owl, by official courier, by Confederation diplomatic pouch, and they came in the specific tone of institutions that have wronged a man and discovered, too late, that he is now powerful enough to make the wronging their problem. The Minister for Magic wrote personally, a letter so thick with regret and so thin on accountability that Harry read it twice for the craftsmanship, offering a full and public restoration of your standing, and any accommodation that might ease your return to the country that has always been proud to call you its son. The Board of Governors of Hogwarts, several of whom had sat in the horseshoe of benches and watched a forger stop a priori after one spell and said nothing, wrote to invite him warmly and without reservation to complete his education at the school, with a clean record and the school's deepest apologies for the failures of process that led to this regrettable episode. Failures of process. Harry admired the phrase the way you admire a wound that has healed into an interesting scar. He answered every one of them because he never wasted a tool, and a powerful institution that owes you a debt is the most useful tool there is. To the minister he wrote that he accepted the restoration of his standing, his estates, and his seats, and would be exercising all of them by proxy from abroad, and that he expected the promised accounting of what Corvin Ashbury had done with his family's fortune to be complete, public, and prompt, and that he would be reading it personally. He did not thank the minister. A man does not thank you for returning what he stole. To the governors he wrote a single paragraph, and he chose the words the way Wednesday chose where to put a blade. Thank you for the invitation to return to Hogwarts, he wrote. I decline it. I learned everything Hogwarts had to teach me on the night it converted its great hall into a courtroom, and expelled an innocent child for a crime it knew he had not committed, because the people who ran it found the truth less convenient than the peace. I don't say this in bitterness. I say it as a simple accounting of the kind your school never managed for me. You taught me what an institution does when protecting a person becomes expensive. It was the most valuable lesson of my education, and I will carry it for the rest of my life, and I have no need to repeat the term. I am completing my education at Nevermore Academy. Among people who told me what they were at the door, I find I prefer it. H.J. Potter. He let Wednesday read it before he sent it. She read it once in the belfry with the late light coming gold through the broken window they had not yet repaired and did not intend to. It's cruel, she said approvingly. Cleanly cruel. You've thanked them and refused them and convicted them in 3 sentences, and there's nothing in it they can quote back at you to make you the bitter one, because it's all true and all calm. She handed it back. You've become very good at this. I take a proprietary pride in it. I'd like it noted that you were merely clever when you arrived. The precision is mine. I sharpened you. You did, Harry agreed and meant it and sent the letter. Larissa Weems received him back in her round tower office the evening of his return, and she did not make a speech about it, because she had told him in October that she dispensed with speeches and she was a woman of her word. She stood at the window over her domain of pines and crows, and she let the silence work, and then she turned and looked at the boy who had crossed an ocean as a convict and come back a verdict. You could have anything now, she said. The minister grovels, the governors apologize. The whole of magical Britain has spent a week discovering that the child it threw away is wealthy, vindicated, and dangerously well-connected, and would crawl over glass to have you back so that it might be photographed forgiving you. She studied him. And you've written to decline a school that wants you and chosen to stay at the one that was handed you as a punishment. I run an institution for outcasts, Mr. Potter. I am not accustomed to being chosen over the alternatives. My students are here because nowhere else would keep them. You're the first one in my tenure who could go anywhere and stayed. A pause. Why? Because you burned the letter, Harry said, the one with the serpent seal. You stood at that fire and burned a demand from the man who framed me in the first hour I was here, before I'd given you a single reason to take my side, when taking my side cost you something and cost you nothing to refuse. He met her composed gaze. Hogwarts had 1,000 years and a great wizard and the deepest magic in Britain, and when protecting me got expensive it spent me. You had a school full of monsters and a borrowed authority and a letter you could have simply obeyed, and you burned it because you said Nevermore doesn't surrender its own to the people who threw them away. He inclined his head, the real way, not the fractional courtroom way. That's the difference between an institution and a home, headmistress. An institution protects you while it's convenient. A home protects you past the point of convenience because you're its own. You did that before you knew whether I was worth it. So when the country that spent me asks for me back, the answer is no. I already have a home. It told me what it was at the door, and then it kept its word. For a long moment, Larissa Weems said nothing at all. Then she crossed to her desk, opened a drawer, and removed a single sheet of heavy black paper sealed with the raven crest of the school, and held it out to him. Your enrollment was provisional, she said. A treaty placement, supervised, conditional on a conviction that no longer exists. By rights it lapsed the moment the Confederation voided the sentence. You are, at this instant, a free citizen with no legal obligation to attend any school at all, let alone mine. She set the black paper in his hand. This is a permanent enrollment, unconditional, not a placement, not a sentence, not an accommodation, an offer from a school to a student it would be proud to keep, the first one I have extended in 9 years. Something moved beneath the composed face, the thing that did not usually move. Nevermore does not surrender its own, Mr. Potter, but it also does not hold anyone who hasn't chosen it freely. So choose, not because Britain wronged you. Because this is where you want to be. Harry looked at the black paper with the raven crest, and then at the principal who had burned a serpent's letter for a stranger, and he took out the quill she had set beside the inkwell, and he signed his name to Nevermore Academy of his own free will, a citizen of the world choosing a school full of monsters over every chamber in Britain. Welcome home, Mr. Potter, said Larissa Weems, and for the first time since the wrought iron gate had opened before him in October, she smiled and it reached her eyes. The wreckage settled over the following weeks, and Harry watched it settle from the belfry that had become the most organized room in the school, and he made certain, with the cold thoroughness he brought to everything now, that nothing that had been broken could reassemble itself. Corvin Ashbury's faction did not survive him. Factions never do. They are held together by the belief that their leader is going to win, and the spectacle of Ashbury's leader being unmade by a thrown-away child in an international chamber dissolved the belief overnight. The pragmatists found urgent reasons to have always opposed him. The frightened men remembered that they had only ever attended the meetings to listen. By the time Ashbury's special session of the Wisengamot convened, he stood as alone as he had stood in the consulate, and the chamber he had spent 30 years controlling stripped him of his office, his seat, and his liberty with the particular savagery of cowards punishing the man who had made them complicit. He received the verdict standing correctly and went to his cell with the appalling dignity Wednesday had predicted, and some people did admire him for it, and he would, exactly as she had said, die there convinced he had been the cleverest man in every room he ever lost. Harry read the account of the sentencing once and never thought about Corvin Ashbury again, which was, he understood, the most complete revenge available, and the only one he wanted. Selwyn Vane did not get to be magnificent. The Confederation tried him for the assault on its chamber and the forgery of a miner's wand, and the forger who could not recant his masterpiece was made to sit in an international court while the stooped wandrite from Krakow testified with bored expert certainty that his proudest work had been crude enough for a child's defense to expose. And the thing that broke Selwyn Vane in the end was not the sentence, which was long, but the testimony which called him second-rate in front of the world. On the record forever, he had spent his life as the most brilliant curse-tracer of his generation. He would spend the rest of it as the genius who got greedy and got caught, the artist who signed his fraud, and that Harry thought was Wednesday's reckoning executed exactly as designed. Not death, which would have made him a tragedy, but ruin, which made him a footnote. She had wanted to put a sword through him. She had instead put the truth through his reputation, and left him alive to live inside the wreck of it, and it was worse than the sword, and she knew it, and Harry caught her reading the trial coverage once with an expression of such pure quiet satisfaction that he had quietly left the room rather than disturb it. Edric Pike served his time, and because he had recanted freely, served less of it, and when he came out he wrote Harry a single short letter that said only thank you for the chance to be on the right side of it at the end. I didn't deserve it, I know, and Harry wrote back 2 lines and never heard from him again, which was the correct shape for that particular debt. Quentin Ashbury, exposed as the staged victim of his own uncle's fraud, was expelled, disgraced, and dropped from every register that had ever flattered him, and vanished into the obscurity that swallows people whose only ever importance was the lie they agreed to tell. Gideon Mowbray kept his head start and was never found, which Harry had promised and Harry honored, because a man who keeps his bargains with monsters keeps them with everyone. And Luna Lovegood came to Nevermore. She came at Harry's invitation and Weem's leave for a week in the dead of the Vermont winter, and she walked through the Gothic halls full of vampires and werewolves and gorgons with the serene, untroubled delight of a woman who had finally found a school that matched her interior weather. She befriended a vampire who hadn't spoken to anyone in a decade by the second day, on the grounds that he had very restful silences. She told Enid gravely that her 2-colored hair was a sensible precaution against being mistaken for someone less interesting, and Enid had decided on the spot that Luna was her favorite person who had ever lived. And she found Harry on the 3rd evening in the belfry, looking at the wall where the red threads still hung, all of them slack now, their work done, and she stood beside him and looked at it too. You took it apart, she said, the whole machine, I read about it. They printed your 3 sentences in the Quibbler, and my father printed them again bigger, with a drawing of a crumple-horned snorkack standing on the consulate steps because he felt the moment needed dignity. She tilted her head at the slack threads. You're going to take this down soon, the wall, you don't need it anymore. Not yet, Harry said. Soon. Keep 1 thread, Luna advised, not because you need it. Because someday you'll forget how close they came, and a person who forgets how close they came stops being careful, and you should never stop being careful, not even now, not even here. She looked at him with her great pale eyes. You came back and burned it down, Harry. I kept the matches dry like I said, but you did the burning. A pause, untroubled, certain. Was I right about the monsters, that you'd like it here because it's honest? Harry looked out the broken window at the black pines and the violet light and the school full of creatures who had told him what they were at the door and then kept their word, and at the girl in black who was, somewhere below them, doing something lethal and precise and entirely herself, and he found that the cold thing in his chest had room now for an answer he could not have given 2 months ago. You were right about everything, he said. Including the part where you said the dangerous part is never over once they think you've stopped fighting. They thought it was over, it was just beginning. He turned to her. Thank you, Luna. You were the only one who came to the gate. I told you I'd remember it longer than the rest of them. I'm going to remember it the longest of anything. Luna smiled her strange, serene smile and patted his arm once and said, I know, and went back to her vampire and his restful silences. And Harry stood a while longer at the wall, and then after a moment he took down 1 thread, only one, and coiled it and put it in his pocket beside his wand, where it would remind him for the rest of his life how close they had come, and how much it had cost to come back. Even Bianca Barclay settled into the new order in her way. She found him in the courtyard where she had once ambushed him on a gray afternoon near the end of winter, and she came alone with no crescent and no song, which Harry noted and respected. She stood for a moment, the siren who had tried to make an example of him on his second day, and then she said stiffly, the way a proud person says a hard thing, I was wrong about you. In October, I thought you were a broken thing the world threw out, and I thought hurting you would be easy and free. She lifted her chin. You weren't broken, you were loaded, and I aimed a stupid little schoolyard ambush at someone who turned out to be the most dangerous person in this school except the one who claimed him. A pause. I run a court, Potter. I know power when it finally embarrasses me into seeing it. I'm not going to pretend we're friends, but I'd rather have you owe me a small courtesy than owe me nothing, so for what it's worth, which isn't much, I'm sorry. And if you ever need the kind of thing a siren's court can do that a wizard and an Adams can't, you can ask, once, at a fair price. Harry looked at her and remembered Wednesday in the cloister. Always leave the door open by a crack. Corpses can't be recruited. We may need her later, and understood that Wednesday had seen this exact moment coming 2 months ago and had broken Bianca precisely hard enough to make it happen, and precisely gently enough to leave it possible. Apology noted, Harry said. Door open by a crack. We may need a siren's court someday. When we do, I'll pay your fair price. He inclined his head, the fractional courtroom degree, the one he'd given her across a refectory a lifetime ago. You learned caution, Bianca. Wednesday said cruel people who learn caution become very precise instruments. She meant it as a use. I think you could make it mean something better than that if you wanted. Your choice. It usually is. And Bianca Barclay looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between resentment and the first uncomfortable seed of respect, and then she nodded once and turned and walked back into the school with her chin up, which was the only dignity available and which she took, and the warband had, without anyone quite deciding it, acquired a siren's court as a contingent ally. Exactly as the most dangerous girl in America had arranged for it to 2 months and one shattered ambush ago. There was the matter of the warband, which had been assembled to win a war and now found itself, somewhat to its own surprise, still standing after the winning. Harry called them to the belfry on a thawing afternoon, Wednesday, Enid and Thing perched on the rail, and he stood before the wall where a single coiled thread now hung, and he did the thing he had been turning over since the consulate steps, which was to give the strange, small family that had pulled him out of the dark a reason to remain a family after the emergency that had made them one. I have a great deal of money again, Harry said. More than I knew. As it turns out, the accounting came back, and Ashbury hadn't yet managed to bleed the Peveril entail, which means the oldest and deepest of the vaults is intact, and it's the kind of fortune that does things rather than merely sits there. He looked at the three of them. I've been thinking about what to do with it, and I've decided. I'm not going to be a rich exile playing at revenge from a tower. The revenge is done. But the reason it was possible that a powerful man could frame a friendless child and almost get away with it, because no one with resources would fight for the friendless, that's not done. That's just how the world works, and it's going to keep working that way to the next thrown-away child and the one after, unless someone with money and a method and a girl who's very good with a sword decides to make it expensive. Enid's two-colored eyes had gone wide. Are you saying what I think you're? I'm endowing something, Harry said. Quietly, no name on the door, no fanfare. The people who'll need it shouldn't have to be famous to deserve it. A fund and a method and a small dangerous group of people who find out when an outcast is being framed, exiled, disappeared, or disposed of by someone powerful enough to think they'll get away with it, and who make sure they don't. He let it sit. I can't run it alone. I have the money and the method. I need a reconnaissance that can go where people can't. I need a network that talks to everyone and forgets nothing. And I need an edge, someone worse than the men will be going after, so that the going after actually frightens them. He looked around the belfry at his strange, small family. You did it once for me when I had nothing to offer any of you. I'm asking if you do it again for people you've never met with rather better equipment. I'm asking you to stay a war band after the war. Thing was the first to answer, drumming an emphatic affirmative on the rail that needed no translation. Enid was the second, and she did it by bursting into tears and hugging Harry so hard he lost his footing, which was, he reflected, exactly the response he should have predicted from a girl whose superpower was being warm in a school that prized cold. I have always wanted to be in something with stakes that actually helps people, she said into his shoulder fiercely, and everyone always tells me I'm too soft for the dangerous stuff, and you're the first person who ever looked at the soft thing and went, that's useful, I need that, the same way Wednesday did with you, and okay, I'm going to cry for a bit, don't make it weird, this is the best day of my life. She pulled back, wiped her eyes, and added with sudden ferocity, also I'm in charge of morale and snacks, that's non-negotiable. A war band that doesn't eat is just a tragedy with extra steps. Granted, Harry said gravely, morale and snacks, a genuine portfolio, we fail without it. Wednesday, who had watched the whole thing from the desk with the typewriter, her chin on her folded hands, said nothing for a long moment and then rose and came to stand beside Harry at the wall level, the way she always stood, and looked at the cold thread that was all that remained of the machine that had nearly ended him. "You're describing a life of hunting powerful men who hurt the defenseless indefinitely with a method, a fortune, and a family," she said. "Danger without end, difficulty without end. A great deal of other people's blood and the occasional window broken from the outside." The black eyes glinted. "You've just described the future I saw on the roof before I saw it. You've described it on purpose because you're building toward it with your eyes open, the way you build toward everything." She tilted her head. "I claimed you because you let me be exactly as much as I am. I'm noting for the record that you've just invented an entire institution whose central requirement is someone worse than the men we hunt, so the hunting frightens them. You built a life that needs me to be the most dangerous thing in every room forever as a feature." The knot smile, slow and genuine. "No one has ever needed my worst quality before. You've made it the cornerstone." She put out her hand, pale and cold, the offer of an equal, the same gesture she'd made in October when she claimed a friendless boy with nothing. Obviously, I was never going to do anything else, but I wanted to make you say the part where you need me to be terrible. I'll be wanting to hear it regularly. Consider it a standing condition of the alliance." "I need you to be terrible," Harry said, and took her hand and meant it as the truest compliment he had. "It's the cornerstone." "Don't ever be less, obviously," Wednesday said, and the deal was struck the way all their deals were struck, on the same heartbeat, two hands releasing at precisely the same moment without a signal passing between them, the synchrony that had told him in October exactly what he was agreeing to and told him now that he'd been right. So the war band did not disband. It acquired a fund, a charter no one ever wrote down, a portfolio of morale and snacks, and a purpose larger than the wound that had created it, and somewhere in the wizarding world, though they did not know it yet, the next Corvin Ashbury assembling the next quiet machine against the next disposable child had just acquired an enemy he could not see, funded by the fortune he'd have stolen, run by the boy he'd have buried, edged by the most dangerous girl in America. And absolutely certain to find him. It was, Wednesday observed later, the best possible use of an inheritance. It was also, she did not say but Harry knew, a way of making certain that what had been done to him would be done to fewer others, and that the strength Dumbledore had spent because it could survive being spent would now be spent by Harry's own choice, on the children too fragile to survive it, which was, Harry thought, the only answer to the old man's arithmetic that he would ever need to give. "You spent my resilience because I could bear it. Fine, watch what I spend it on. Watch me make my strength a shield for the people you'd have fed to the machine." It was not forgiveness. It was better than forgiveness. It was a verdict that kept on being handed down every time the warband found another thrown-away child and refused to let them stay thrown away. They sealed it in the end the way they did everything, which was obliquely and at midnight and with steel in their hands. The fencing hall in the school's lower level had become theirs by long custom, and they came to it the night after Luna left, not because either of them said so, but because they both arrived at the same hour without arranging it, which had stopped surprising Harry and started meaning something he had no word for. Wednesday was already there when he came down, foil in hand, the button tipped back on it now that there was no one left who needed killing, and she did not greet him, because greetings were for people who had to announce that they were glad, and they had passed beyond the need to announce it weeks ago. They fought. He was better than he had been in October, much better. She had sharpened him the way she'd sharpened everything about him, and she was still better than he was and would likely always be, and the knowledge had stopped being a wound and become a comfort, because a person who is better than you and yours is the safest thing in the world to stand beside. They fought until they were both breathing hard and neither had landed a clean touch in 10 exchanges, and then Wednesday stepped back, lowered her foil, and looked at him across the empty hall with the flat black attention that he now understood was not coldness but depth, the cold of deep water, a sign of how far down she went. "I've been thinking about the word," she said. "Claimed. I used it in October because it was accurate and because it would unsettle you, both of which I enjoyed. But you asked me once to be clear about what it meant because you de-learned the price of unclear things, and I gave you a partial answer and let you fill in the rest." She set the foil down on the rack, deliberately, the small ritual of a thing being concluded. "You filled it in wrong. I've been watching you fill it in wrong for 2 months, and I dislike inaccuracy, so I'm going to correct it before it sets." Harry set his own foil down. "Tell me how I filled it in wrong." "You think I claimed you out of strategy, an ally more dangerous than yourself, a peer worth standing beside, an instrument I acquired because you were the rarest tool in the building." The black eyes did not waver. "All of that is true. It was true in October, and it's true now. But it was never the whole of it, and you've let yourself believe it was the whole of it, because the whole of it frightens you more than any frame or forger ever did, and I understand why, because it frightens me identically." She crossed the hall unhurried and stopped in front of him, close enough that he could see the chips of darker black in her eyes. "I claimed you because you are the only person I have ever met whom I do not have to make smaller in order to stand beside. everyone else my entire life, I have had to choose between being honest and being tolerated, between being dangerous and being kept. You looked at the most dangerous thing about me and said, "Good, stand beside me," and you have never once in 2 months flinched or tried to gentle me or ask me to be less. You let me be exactly as much as I am, and you matched it, and you have no idea, Harry, how much of my life I had spent certain that no such person existed. Her flat voice did not rise, but something underneath it had gone very still. That's the claim, not strategy, recognition. I claimed you because you were the first proof I'd ever had that I would not have to be alone in order to be myself. And I will defend that proof past every point of convenience there is, because I waited my entire life for it, and the world does not get to take what's mine, not twice, not while I'm standing. The fencing hall was very quiet. Somewhere above them the school slept, full of monsters, indifferent and safe. Harry looked at her, at the small, straight-backed girl who had come through a window 2 seconds late to put a sword through the hand of the man who'd ended his life, who had crossed an ocean alone to gather the proof that cleared him, who had just said, in the flattest voice imaginable and without a single soft word, the one thing he had needed to hear since a tired old man in a high seat had taught him that his strength was the reason it was safe to throw him away. "I filled it in wrong on purpose," he said. "Same reason you gave a partial answer in October, because the whole of it frightened me." He held her gaze and did not flinch, and found that he no longer wanted to. "Everyone who ever loved me, Wednesday, loved me for what I could do for them. The boy who lived, the weapon, the one strong enough to be spent. Even Dumbledore, especially Dumbledore, looked at the best thing in me and saw a resource. So I learned to be useful, because useful was the only kind of love I'd ever been given, and I told myself that what we had was strategy, because strategy I understood, and strategy couldn't be taken away by an arithmetic of sacrifice the way the other thing always had been." He breathed out and let the cold thing in his chest open the rest of the way, the last lock, the one he kept shut through the frame and the exile and the war. "But you didn't claim me because I was useful. You claimed a convicted, exiled, friendless boy with nothing on his second day, before I'd proven I could do anything for you at all. You claimed me when I was worth nothing to anyone, which is the exact moment everyone else in my life decided I was worth spending." His voice was steady. "That's the difference. That's the whole difference. They valued my strength and spent my weakness. You looked at me at my weakest and called it interesting and decided to keep it. Nobody has ever done that." I didn't know a person could. He almost couldn't say the next part, and said it anyway because she despised anything less than exact. "So yes, recognition, not strategy. I knew it in October, and I've been calling it the wrong name for 2 months, because the right name meant I'd finally been kept for the thing I am instead of the thing I'm good for, and I didn't know how to survive wanting that as much as I wanted it. I do now, so, there, accurate enough." For a long moment Wednesday Addams did not answer. Then she reached up slowly, deliberately, the most considered gesture he had ever seen her make, and she put her cold, pale hand flat against the side of his face, the way you'd touch a thing to confirm it was real, and her thumb moved once across his cheekbone, and it was the only purely tender thing he had ever seen her do, and it undid him more completely than any of the words. "Accurate enough," she said. Her flat voice had gone rough at the edges, the way it had after the vision, the way it went only when the thing was true all the way down. "I'm not going to kiss you, not tonight. We're going to do this slowly and badly and with great commitment, because neither of us has ever done it at all, and I refuse to be merely competent at the most important thing that has ever happened to me." Her thumb moved once more and stilled, and her hand stayed where it was. "But I want you to have the data since you gave me yours. I have been to 2 funerals, a poisoning, and an international tribunal this year. I have put a sword through a man's hand and watched an empire fall and been called the most dangerous student in a school full of monsters, and I have felt, through all of it, almost nothing, because almost nothing is the temperature I keep." The black eyes held his, and for once, for the only time he would ever see, there was no distance in them at all. "And then a thrown-away boy crossed an ocean and let me be exactly as much as I am, and matched it, and I find that I would burn down the world a second time, slower, just to keep him. Don't make it sentimental." Her hand finally fell, and her mouth did something that was, at last, almost a smile. "It's just that I love you, and I've never said that to anyone, and I needed to say it once where it was true, before I go back to pretending I'm incapable of it, which I intend to do for the rest of our lives, and which you will see through every time, and which is the arrangement I want if you want it too." "I want it," Harry said, slowly, badly, with great commitment. He covered her hand where it had fallen to his, just for a moment, the warm over the cold. "Same, Wednesday, the thing you said." "Same, I know," she said, in Luna's exact serene cadence, deadpan, and Harry laughed. And she did not laugh, but something in the still white face came as close to it as it ever would, and the two of them stood in the empty fencing hall at midnight, claimed and claiming, equal and matched, 2 outcasts who had each been certain they would be alone forever and had been, both of them, magnificently wrong. The vision took her on the last night of winter, and this time, for the first time, she did not face it alone. They were on the roof of the East Tower, where Harry had taken to going to watch the cold stars wheel over the black pines, and Wednesday had taken to joining him, because she found the height honest and the company tolerable, and would not have admitted to either under torture. The sky over Nevermore was vast and clear and baroque with stars, more stars than Britain's soft gray heavens had ever shown him, the whole spangled machinery of the dark turning slow above the spires and the gargoyles and the crows asleep on every ledge. And Wednesday, sitting beside him with her knees drawn up and her black eyes on the wheeling stars, reached out without looking and took his hand, not for tenderness, he understood, but to brace, because she had felt the gift coming the way you feel a storm in your teeth, and the future kicked the door open and dragged her through it. He held her hand the whole time. She had told him once that the visions took her alone, that she came out of them on the floor and required that no one comment, and he did not comment now. He simply held on, an anchor in the dark, while the tendons stood out in her neck and her breath stopped and her black eyes filled with a future neither of them had earned the right to see yet. And when it released her, she did not fall because he was there, and she did not have to. She came back slowly, the black draining out of her eyes to their ordinary darkness, and for a while she said nothing, looking at the stars, her cold hand still in his. "What did you see?" he asked finally when her breathing had steadied. "Us." Her flat voice was rough. "Years, a great many years. The gift doesn't usually reach that far. It prefers to show me the worst of next week, but tonight it went long, as though it wanted me to have something." She did not look at him, she looked at the wheeling baroque dark. "I won't tell you most of it. Visions are weapons and futures are fragile, and a person who knows too much of his own becomes a coward or a tyrant, and you'll be neither, because I'd find both tedious. But I'll tell you the shape." Her hand tightened on his. "It isn't soft, Harry. I want you to know that because you've spent your whole life being promised soft things by people who meant to spend you, and I will never once promise you a soft thing, because I don't deal in them, and you'd never believe me if I did. What I saw isn't peace. It's war mostly. The world is full of men like Ashbury, and the next one is always assembling himself somewhere, and we are exactly the kind of people such men learn to fear, and we will spend our lives being the thing that finds them and takes them apart, you with the truth and me with the steel, because we're good at it, and because someone has to be, and because we enjoy it, which is the part the soft people will never understand and never need to." She turned her head at last, and the starlight caught the edges of her white face. "It's danger and difficulty and a great deal of other people's blood, and you and me at the center of it, claimed and claiming for a very long time. That's the shape, that's the future. It's not a happy ending, it's a worthy one, and I've never wanted any other kind, and now, for the first time, I won't have to want it alone." Harry looked at her, at the most dangerous girl in America, who had just refused to promise him a soft thing because every soft thing he'd ever been promised had been a prelude to being spent, and understood that she had given him, in that refusal, the truest vow anyone had ever made him. "Good," he said, and meant it all the way down. "I don't want soft. Soft is what they offered me to come back to Britain. Soft is what Dumbledore wanted me to settle for, so I'd stop being inconvenient. I had soft Wednesday. It betrayed me in a converted great hall." He looked out over the spires and the sleeping crows and the vast wheeling dark. "I want worthy. I want the war and the difficulty and the work of taking apart the next man who decides a person is a thing he can dispose of. I want to be the thing they learned too late to fear, with you, for a very long time." His hand was warm over her cold one, and neither of them let go. "Show me the rest of it when we get there, 1 year at a time. We'll find out together how it ends." "It doesn't end," Wednesday said. "That's the part I'll tell you, since you've earned one piece of it. In everything the gift showed me all those years, down all that danger, it doesn't end. We don't lose each other. The world tries, the world is always trying, and it doesn't manage it, not in anything I saw, not once." She looked back at the stars, and her flat voice carried out into the enormous dark, dry and certain, and underneath, fierce as anything he had ever heard. "They threw you into the dark to be rid of you, and the dark turned out to be where I live, and I found you in it, and I kept you, and nothing they have, not their chambers or their forgers or their arithmetic of sacrifice, is ever getting you back. You're mine, Harry Potter. The wizarding world had you for 16 years and decided you were a thing it could spend. I've had you for 2 months, and I'd unmake creation before I'd spend a single hour of you. The ghost of the not smile. They should have snapped your wand. It's the one mercy that might have saved them. Instead, they left you sharp and shipped you to me. And now we're going to be the most dangerous thing either world has ever produced, and they are going to spend the rest of their lives knowing they built us themselves." She tilted her head at the wheeling stars. "It's the most romantic thing I can imagine. Don't respond to it, just watch the sky. We have a very long time, and I find I'm in no hurry, which has never once happened to me before." So Harry Potter sat on the roof of a school full of monsters, on the last cold night of winter, under a baroque and enormous dark, holding the hand of the girl who had claimed him when he was worth nothing to anyone, and he watched the stars wheel over the spires, and he was not afraid. Below them, 3,000 miles away, the wizarding world that had framed him and exiled him and tried to divide his bones slept on in its soft gray country, picking through the wreckage of the boy it had thrown away, learning slowly and far too late exactly what it had let slip through its fingers. Not the boy who lived, not the weapon, not the resource strong enough to be spent, but a cold, deliberate thing it had sharpened with its own betrayal and handed, gift-trapped. To the one person alive who knew its worth, they had thrown him into the dark. The dark had a name, and her name was Wednesday Addams, and she had caught him, and she was never letting go. And together, claimed and ascendant, the two outcasts watched the stars and waited with perfect patience for the world to learn what it had done. Chapter 7 End.